Live from London, this is BBC News. Votes are being counted in the Clacton by-election, with results expected in the early hours of Friday morning. Well, let's take you to the scene live at the Clacton Leisure Centre as those votes are counted. Well, Nigel Farage claims he's already won.
Welcome to one of the most unusual by-elections in recent British political history. Reform UK hope an overwhelming victory here helps them move on from questions about Nigel Farage's finances.
We'll be live with Harry in the coming hours. We'll also have analysis here in the studio from the BBC's elections expert, Sir John Curtis. In other news, 2 people are seriously injured after a train derails in East Sussex. Around 150 passengers were on board. A child and 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital after multiple fires tear through the West Midlands.
It's going to be Amy Hunt. Adeleke finishes quick. 22.
And Britain's Amy Hunt has won her 2nd gold medal in the 200-metre sprint at the European Athletics Championships.
She has it all.
Hello, I'm Regina Viganarvan. Welcome to our special coverage as counting is well underway in Clacton in a parliamentary by-election, one of the most unusual in recent political history. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage claims he's won it again fairly convincingly. While the by-election in Clacton in Essex was triggered last month after Mr Farage resigned from the seat that he won in 2024 amid an investigation over his finances. Let's take you back to the scene live at the Clacton Leisure Centre as those votes continue to be counted. Well, a result could be several hours away still. That's because there are a record 34 candidates standing in it. Well, let's go back to the count and join our political correspondent, Harry Farley, who is there for us. So we can see all the counting on going furiously behind you. Just tell us what you're hearing at the moment.
Well, I'm hearing quite a lot of confidence, it has to be said, from Reform UK. Unsurprising, really. I mean, no one really doubted from the moment the polls closed that Reform UK, that Nigel Farage would win, and would win pretty comfortably, to be honest. In the last few minutes, a Reform UK source has said to me that if Nigel Farage wins by more votes tonight than he did in 2024, then his decision to call this by-election against the establishment will be vindicated. I suppose the counter is obviously that in 2024, the main political parties chose to stand, whereas tonight Nigel Farage has a lot of competition, but it's fairly thinly spread. I mean, have a look at this ballot paper here. It's absolutely vast. It's about a metre long, 34 candidates, as you said, on it, a record for British political history. 3 candidates from the official monster raving loony party, as well as, of course, Count Binface and a man from an outfit called Everyone is God party. So there is a humour, there is an unusual nature to this campaign. Reform UK, Nigel Farage are very confident, but I think the key thing to look out for will be the margin of victory by which Nigel Farage wins, and whether that enables him to make the argument that he wants to make, that the people of Clacton don't care about all the questions that we've been talking about his finances.
And Harry, why did he trigger this in the first place?
Yeah, it's worth remembering that Nigel Farage chose to call this by-election. He stood down, he quit as an MP in the middle of a parliamentary investigation into a £5 million gift that he received before he was elected, and whether he should have declared it. Nigel Farage insists that he did nothing wrong, although interestingly earlier this evening he said that he may have forgotten to fill in a piece of paper. So perhaps an indication there that he isn't entirely confident that that parliamentary investigation will go his way if indeed he wins tonight, because that investigation will get underway again. So he called this by-election in the middle of that inquiry, hoping, he said, that the people of Clacton will be the judges of his actions, hoping effectively to use the by-election as a way to silence those questions from both the parliamentary investigation and from the media into those donations that he received, and whether he should have declared them.
And Harry, you talk about the long list of candidates, but of course, as you briefly mentioned there, none of the main political parties decided to contest this by-election. So what have they had to say about tonight?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. The main political party said that this was a stunt, this was a farce, that they wouldn't be participating because of that. And that's along the lines that we've heard from them tonight. Bridget Phillipson, the chair of the Labour Party, said that Nigel Farage had spent the last 38 days arguing with a bin, a reference, of course, to Count Binface, who's emerged, as I suppose, as the most prominent of the 33 challengers to Nigel Farage. So I suppose a sense of dismissiveness, really, from the other parties. They want to downplay the significance of today and downplay the significance of any victory that Nigel Farage has. He wants to use it as a springboard to move on from those questions, that he hopes will enable him to talk about other policy areas that he wants to talk about ahead of their conference, of course, Reform Conference in September.
Harry Farley, thank you for the moment. We'll be back with Harry shortly, but let's go straight to Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde and, of course, the BBC's election expert who joins me in the studio. We may have a few hours before we get the results, so we may as well settle in for a bit, John. But we do have the turnout. Tell us what it is and the significance.
Yeah, the turnout is 44%. That means that it is only a little below the turnout in Runcorn when Reform won a seat from Labour earlier in this Parliament, or indeed in Gorton and Denton when the Greens won a seat. It's certainly lower than Makerfield, but it's actually higher than in two by-elections held in Scotland on the same day as the Makerfield by-election. It's also, by the way, higher than the turnout, which was just over a third, in the Halton Price and Howden by-election of 2008. Now, why are we talking about the Halton Price and Howden by-election 2008? Well, that is the one previous occasion when a incumbent MP has stood down, precipitated a by-election and then fought the by-election under the same colours that he previously won the seat. In that instance, it was David Davis, then Shadow Conservative Home Secretary and subsequently became a Conservative Minister under Theresa May and Boris Johnson. He stood. He won overwhelmingly. That, by the way, was a by-election and also attracted an awful lot of candidates. But as compared with that, also the turnout in this by-election is markedly higher. And I think, therefore, it does to some degree gainsay the arguments that we've just heard from the parties who decided not to contest, that this is a bit of a farce. If the voters of Clacton at least thought it was a farce, I don't think we would necessarily expect the turnout to be 44%, which frankly, by the standards of by-elections, is not bad at all.
No, not at all. Now, you mentioned, of course, the absence of the major political parties. Of course, a very long candidate list, as we heard there from Harry Farley. There's been a lot of attention on one of the candidates, Count Binface, with some projections saying he could do quite well out of all of this. I mean, how would you assess the role of all the other candidates in all of this?
Well, the interesting thing about Count Binface, of course, he stood before in a number of elections, including as London Mayor. He's never managed to get more than 1%. He's become one of those many eccentric candidates that sometimes contest our by-elections. The Monster Ravy ruling party is another long-standing example going all the way back to the 1980s. They're actually putting up 3 candidates in this by-election. They seem to be trying to defeat themselves. Now, I think the interesting thing is that within 24 hours of Nigel Farage announcing that he was going to precipitate this by-election, Count Binface, who actually is Jonathan Harvey, a well-known comedy sketch writer, he said, I'm going to stand. And because of the interest in the by-election and because the other main party said they weren't standing, immediately he was on the Today programme, he was on Newsnight, he was getting a lot of publicity. And then the parties who decided they weren't going to fight said, look, the person who is going to be standing against Nigel Farage is a bin, and trying to use that to reinforce their argument that this by-election was indeed a farce. And certainly all expectations are that Count Binface may indeed come second and will profit hugely from the publicity that he's managed to get, partly thanks to the mainstream media and partly thanks to the opponents of Nigel Farage.
And might get his deposit back for the first time as well. We're going to hear from Count Binface in a second, but let's just zoom out briefly if we can, John. There were questions about triggering this by-election and whether that would be a good thing, not just for Nigel Farage, but Reform UK as a whole. And it's been a long month in British politics because we've now got a new Prime Minister since that by-election was triggered. What are the national picture? What is the national picture in all of this then?
Well, the truth is the national picture for reform is now not as good as it has been for most of the last 12 months. If we actually go back to July the 7th, which is the day that Nigel Farage announced that he was indeed going to precipitate this by-election in the wake of the allegations about whether or not he should have declared financing he'd got from a crypto financier before he became an MP. And also there were stories beginning to emerge about allegations about some of the sources of funds that were paid directly to Reform. Now, the truth is that in the wake of that announcement by Nigel Farage, support for Reform, which had been gradually in decline, but was still running at around 26 to 27%, fell instantly down to about 24%, which is where it still is. So certainly one has to say that either the decision to fight the by-election or perhaps the publicity that the decision gave to some of the allegations about Nigel Farage and about his party have not done any obvious immediate good to Reform's prospects. Meanwhile, of course, the Labour Party has changed its leader and our Prime Minister, and in the wake of that, Labour have enjoyed something of a bounce. As a result of the two developments, Labour are now narrowly ahead of Labour in the polls, only by about a point or so. But it does mean that Reform, who've been ahead and enjoying all the publicity that comes with that for more than 12 months, suddenly find themselves in a competition for first place. Oh, and by the way, the Conservatives, which is the party that Reform are trying to displace. Reform want to become the principal party of the right in the UK. Now find themselves, having been for months a long way behind Reform, now only 4 points behind because their vote's gone up to some degree as well. And meanwhile, Nigel Farage also has to worry about somebody he fell out with, Rupert Lowe, who's created his own party called Restore Britain, did rather well in the Manchester and Makerfield by-elections, gaining about 4% in the national opinion polls. And again, a lot of that's probably at Reform's expense. So Reform seem to have lost out by calling the by-election. They're losing ground perhaps to Restore Britain. And meanwhile, the Conservatives also showing signs of recovery. That all means that Reform now finding themselves in a much more competitive political space. And in a sense, the real challenge now for Nigel Farage, having presumably won this by-election, is how can he use it to begin to improve his party standing in the poll and to reverse some of the decline that it's been suffering during the course of recent months, and particularly most immediately in the wake of the decision to call this by-election.
Yeah, lots to unpick there, of course. John, you will be with us for the hours as we wait for that result to see whether indeed Nigel Farage has won again or not. John Curtis, for the moment, thank you very much. Well, let's go back to Harry Farley in Clacton, though, because, Harry, I think you've got an update there, and, of course, your promised interview with Count Binface as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating to hear Sir John there talking about some of the struggles that Reform UK are facing, and also the emergence of Count Binface as the main candidate, the main rival, I suppose, out of those 34 candidates taking on Nigel Farage. I think we might be able to show you, there's a bit of a crash behind me, but I think we might be able to show you how they're counting here, because such is the dominance of Nigel Farage and Count Binface that the organisers here have split counting into 3 piles. There is one pile for votes for Nigel Farage, one pile for votes for Count Binface, and then another pile for all the other 32 candidates. And once they've counted the votes for Mr Farage and Count Binface, then they will go through and count the votes for all the other 32 candidates. But I think you can see there an admission, an acknowledgement from the organisers here that this has become somewhat of a 2-horse race between Nigel Farage and Count Binface, who I spoke to in the last few minutes or so. And I began by asking him whether he was now the establishment candidate.
In a way, it's a compliment to, how many? 8 weeks ago, I scored 0.2% of the vote against Andy Burnham in Makerfield. Nobody was calling me the establishment then. And now, just 8 weeks later, let's just say I get 5% of the vote. That's a 2,500% swing to Binface, hashtag swing bin. And so suddenly I'm the face of the establishment. However, I would argue, Harry, that someone who has been an MP, been an MEP, who is one of the chief architects of Brexit and one of the dominant figures in British politics over the last 20 years, and is reputedly a member of the East India Gentlemen's Club, which apparently does not admit women, I would say that's arguably slightly more establishment than a lone wolf space warrior with a CFAX fixation. But you know what? It's up to you.
You're on the BBC World, speaking to a global audience. Tell us some of your policies. 99p flakes to cost 99p. Take us through some of the other things that you would do if you are elected MP in Clacton.
Well, I mean, if it's a global audience, that's a little parochial for me, but I'll carry on. Yes, as you say, 99 flakes to be price capped, but also bus fares in Clacton to be price capped at £1.99. Take that, Andy. I will also pledge to build at least one affordable house. I will fill potholes with copies of the 2024 Labour manifesto. Any MP who calls a by-election without changing party mid-parliament should be barred from the resulting by-election. Any MP that crosses the floor should be forced to face a by-election. And of course, the pièce de résistance. Oil and gas companies to pay for solar panels for everyone. That one comes from Jack, age 10, because it's their planet and mine, not yours.
So there's a mixture of comical and slightly more serious policies there. I mean, I suppose there is a serious point. Are you making a mockery of democracy by standing in not just this by-election, but the countless others that you have done? Is there a danger that you trivialise what is ultimately quite a serious exercise?
Well, I appreciate the question. I'm very happy to answer that. I would argue that the reverse is the case, that British democracy is unique in the entire world, that anybody, you, any of the viewers, even me, no matter what you believe or what you look like, have a right to stand for election and, so importantly, stand on a stage, or in this case the floor, alongside the Prime Minister or a Minister of the Day or a far-right leader, whoever it is. You have a right to do that. It's the great leveller. And I would say the mockery is being made by those countries that don't have democracy, like China, Russia and North Korea. So my job is to celebrate. If it helps people, people have said they enjoy what I do, that's fantastic. But I think it's also really important that in the coming up to the mid-21st century, that Britain celebrates something that it actually does better than the rest of your planet. How about that?
Very, very good. Thanks, Count Binface. One final question. This is probably your best, or at least most high-profile by-election so far. What would be a good result? What are you expecting from tonight?
Well, I mean, it goes without saying that an actual victory would be the best. Just in case that happens, I brought with me the declaration form. Just if I was to get a £5 million donation, it must be filled in. I don't know if you know that, but I would make sure that this was filled in. First thing I do, basically, that and increasing the size of the door frames in Westminster. But, one vote is special. 309 would be a bin-face record. 5% I get my deposit back, and then after that, it's for you guys to crunch the numbers and work out what percentage of humans would rather elect an alien with a Lovejoy fixation than Nigel Farage, who wants to be the next Prime Minister. I'll leave that with you.
And if Nigel Farage does win, there is a possibility that we could be back here in a few months' time. Will you be standing there again?
Well, that's the curious thing, isn't it? I said that in my manifesto. Vote Binface and you would save an approximate £350,000 from another by-election. Maybe that could be paid out of Nigel's £5 million. But, what I think is that far from being an FA Cup tie, like a final, it might just be that this election is the start of a two-legged match, like the Carabao Cup or the Cold War. And that might mean we're back here, and all I've got to do is not ship too many goals too soon. You all know that, Harry. The game isn't over yet.
Well, I suppose a mixture there of slightly more tongue-in-cheek as well as some more serious points made by Count Binface, who, as the evidence is behind me, has emerged as sort of the main rival, really, to Nigel Farage here. With the Reform UK leader himself, he is not here. He is speaking at an event in the Essex countryside for his supporters that's been called Farage Fest. So he is there. We're expecting him to join shortly before the declaration, and that could be several hours away. We'll bring you all the updates as and when we get them.
Thank you, Harry Farley. For the moment, we will keep an eye on that podium. You can see on the screen there, we are expecting Nigel Farage to speak in Essex. We'll bring that live when he begins. Let's speak now to journalist Tim Burrows, who wrote a book called The Invention of Essex. Welcome to BBC News. You've been a resident of Clacton since 2022. How would you describe its politics and, I guess, its vibe, if that's the right word to use?
Hi there. I'm sorry, I'm not a resident of Clacton. I'm actually from Southend.
Oh, OK.
in Essex. So I know
saw
the
something
seaside
that
town.
said you'd lived there in 2022, but my apologies.
No,
Southend's
that's
not
all right.
far.
No, and I've spent a lot of time in Clacton. I mean, it's sort of close to my heart. I grew up in Southend-on-Sea, so I know the draw of the Essex seaside town. It's drawn sort of Londoners to it since the 19th century. And Clacton is a place of great extremes. It's got extreme deprivation. It's got extreme wealth. People think of Clacton as a very homogenous place. And
I'm going to have to stop you there, Tim. I'm really sorry because Mr. Farage is about to speak. We'll be back with you in a second. Let's listen in.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Clactonbury. I called this by-election because I wanted the people of Clacton, the voters of this constituency, to be my judge, not the mainstream media in Britain, and the political establishment who paint us out to be criminals and bad people every day. So I asked the voters of Clacton to be my jury. And the verdict has now come in. You haven't heard it yet. And the verdict is in, and it is a convincing, overwhelming win with more votes Please, I'm very shy. On the hottest day of the year, in the middle of August, in holiday season, we have secured far more votes than we got in the general election of 2024. And in doing so, we have beaten the candidate for the Unity Party. Yes, there were Liberal Democrats, Labour and Conservative canvassers out canvassing for Count Binface. What an upside-down world it is, where Count Binface is now the candidate of the establishment. I mean, you literally couldn't make it up. The count is still going on because there are 34 candidates, and I doubt we'll get a full result, until 6, 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. But there's no question about the result. I've explained that to you already. I really feel that we've not been forgiven for May the 7th. On May the 7th, here in Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk, we crushed the Conservative Party. Crushed them entirely. In the north of England, we wiped out the Labour Party. In Wales, we became the official opposition. In Scotland, with a joint opposition. And they decided if they couldn't beat us by fair means, they'd try and beat us by foul means. Today, the voters in Clacton have stuck 2 fingers up to the entire political establishment. I want to thank all of you, my beloved People's Army, for going out there and doing what you've done. I want to thank Tendring District Council for running this by-election so well and so efficiently in difficult circumstances. But I also want us to remember, in a solemn moment, the fact that yesterday was the funeral of Anne Widdecombe. God bless her. God bless her. Murdered for having her own deep Christian convictions. Murdered for being a supporter of reform. Murdered by an intolerance that has now swept through the entire left-wing politics of Britain and is aided, abetted and incited every single day by broadcasters and national newspapers. And when the truth finally comes out about the circumstances of this, and you will have seen that the investigation has now widened to include incidents in which I've been involved, when the truth comes out, the public will be truly, truly shocked. And despite the fact this is a night of great celebration and enormous fun, and this incredible Clactonbury, Farage Fest, with its own Ferris wheel, how about that? I last stood on a stage as a candidate in a by-election 33 years ago. It is now 33 years since I first stood in a parliamentary by-election. That was Eastleigh, back in 1994. They're a funny old lot from Hampshire, aren't they? And over the intervening years, I've stood in many elections, general elections, European elections, and now a second by-election. And every time, I've really enjoyed going to the count. It's exciting, it's dramatic, it's, you know, you're on the stage, it's something to be at. And I'm sad to say that after 33 years of being a candidate in active politics, I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time. And once again it shows you the sheer intolerance, the sheer loss of fundamental democratic principles that those that went before us fought in world wars to fight for and preserve. And this shows you why the battle that we're engaged upon in this great party, in this great movement of ours, is to get this country back to the values that it needs to be. And so I regret to say, and by the way, I'm not scared of these people, far from it. But I'm damned if I'm going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory, a ringing endorsement of all that I've tried to fight for and you try to fight for, and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. And I will not, sadly, be attending the count, which means I'm going to be here all night. So, let the party begin. But before that, let's have a look at the campaign over the course of the last few weeks via a video, including today, and my love and thanks to all of you. Thank you.
We're now going to leave Mr Farage there, who is claiming victory in that by-election in Clacton before the returning officer has actually announced the result. But it was a real show of victory there. I think the crucial thing that came out of all of that, though, is that he said he'd been advised by Essex Police that there was some effort to disrupt the election tonight. And then he also said that he was not going to go to the count, which is quite unusual. Normally all the candidates, of course, go to hear the results of an election, whether it's a by-election or a general election. He says, I'm damned if I'm going to stand on stage and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. Well, let's go to Harry Farley, who is definitely not a nobody, our political correspondent who is in Clacton for us. So, Harry, what did you make all of that? There were some rumours earlier in the evening that Mr Farage might not attend the count.
Yeah, some rumours. I suppose the spectacle of being stood alongside a man with a bin on his head and three candidates from the official monster raving loony party is not one that Nigel Farage would have enjoyed. He would not have enjoyed that comparison. And we were talking earlier in the night and saying, the danger from this exercise, calling this by-election, is that Nigel Farage looks like an unserious politician stood alongside what are essentially a group of independent, smaller parties, but then also joke candidates, effectively, and that would undermine him. That would make him look not like the Prime Minister in waiting that he insists he is, but like someone who is fighting a smaller campaign. And that is what he has obviously sought to avoid. He didn't want, and he says, as you say, the Essex Police have advised him that there was an organised campaign to disrupt the result. We'll obviously check that with Essex Police as well, see if we can get any more details about that. But Nigel Farage choosing not to attend the count tonight, saying that he is confident of a convincing, overwhelming win. I mean, counting is still going on behind me. I think that the outcome of this result is not really the most telling thing here. We were confident from the moment polls closed that Reform UK and Nigel Farage would win and win very comfortably. But Nigel Farage has chosen not to come and stand alongside the other candidates here. He will not be making a speech here tonight. That essentially was his victory speech. And so he will, the result we will get in the early hours of this morning, probably around breakfast time. But Nigel Farage won't be here to hear his own victory message.
Indeed, one thing that I'll discuss with John Curtis in a second as well, but one thing that Mr Farage said is that he believes he's got far more votes this time round than when he first won Clacton in 24.
Yes, and a Reform source was telling me that half an hour or so, an hour or so ago. They are very confident that he's got more than the 22,000 or so votes that he got in 2024. The significance of that is obviously in 2024 there was a greater number of total votes cast. The turnout was higher because it was a general election. There was more awareness of it. There was more build-up. There was much more media coverage in the build-up to that general election. And of course, Nigel Farage a very prominent part in that general election campaign in choosing to return to politics and stand. So they believe that he has won more votes tonight on a smaller total turnout, smaller total number of votes. He's won more, nevertheless, than in that 2024 general election campaign. And they argue that that is vindication for his decision to call a by-election. They argue that sends that message that they want to send to the establishment. I suppose the counterpoint is obviously in 2024 there were lots of other main parties standing, and as I say, the question is less whether this sends the message that Reform want to, it's whether it enables them to move on from questions about Nigel Farage's finance onto the policies that they want to talk about.
Indeed. Let's talk about that, because there is this parliamentary investigation. Where do things stand then on all of this? Because there was a question mark about whether there might be another by-election depending on the outcome of that.
Yeah, that is still possible because, as you say, Nigel Farage called this by-election in the middle of a parliamentary investigation into that £5 million gift that he received from the crypto billionaire. That was before he was elected. He argues he did nothing wrong, but the parliamentary authorities, independent commissioner, is looking into whether he should have declared that. So that investigation was ongoing when Nigel Farage triggered this by-election. At that point, it was paused because he was no longer technically an MP. If he wins tonight and then is sworn in again as an MP in September, that investigation will get going again. And if it finds that he was wrong not to declare it, if they find that that was a serious breach of the rules, there is a possibility that a recall petition, a mechanism by which voters can choose to have a by-election, could be triggered, and we could be back here all over again in the months to come.
OK, Harry Farley, for the moment, thank you very much. We will be back with you because, of course, let's not forget, Harry, there are still votes being counted, despite the fact that Mr Farage has already declared himself the winner. Let's speak to John Curtis, our elections expert. So, John, there's lots to process and digest. First of all, mathematically, is it possible for Nigel Farage to already assume that he's the winner now? Can we assume that he's won?
Well, what presumably Reform have done, which is what all political parties do as a count, at the first stage of a count, what is happening is that the counters are simply trying to work out how many ballot papers there are in each of the polling boxes to make sure that the number of ballot papers they've got is in accordance with the record of what should be there. And as a result of that process, the parties can see whose name is being elected on each of the ballot papers. So if they're organised, they can do a systematic tally of the ballot papers as they are being verified as opposed to being counted, and thereby come up with an estimate of what they think the result's going to be. Now, assuming Reform are that well organised, and of course they're still a relatively nascent political party as far as organisation is concerned, then they should indeed have a fairly good idea of what their share of the vote is, and certainly therefore their claim that Mr Farage is going to get more than 21,225 votes presumably comes from some such exercise. It's worth kind of saying, well, what might that mean? I mean, they're certainly saying this goes to prove that, as it were, Mr Farage is at least as popular as he was back in 2024, so therefore what's the fuss about what he did or didn't declare to the Commons authorities? Another way of looking at it, and maybe he will reach this mark, if we go back to the Halton Price and Howden by-election that I was talking about half an hour, the one that David Davis precipitated in not dissimilar circumstances. Mr Davis actually got 72% of the vote, and his share of the vote in the previous general election was not that different from what Nigel Farage got in Clacton, 46%. So it'll be interesting to see whether Mr Farage does as well as that or not. He manages to pass that benchmark, then we can say that in comparison with, frankly, the one and only other by-election which is comparable to this one, Mr Farage has done relatively well.
Interesting, isn't it, John? I should just say it's just gone at 3 in the morning here in the UK, and we were expecting that result. We still are expecting that result. We haven't got it informally, but we were expecting the outcome of this to come many hours from now. But we already pretty much know, don't we now? Yeah,
and I think we also know where this argument is going. Let's come back to the conversation we were just having with Harry Farley. I think the way that Mr Farage now plans this going out is saying, well, look, guys, we've already had a by-election. I have won. Now, even if maybe in the end the Parliamentary Commission for Standards thinks I should have declared the £5 million to the authorities, maybe it might be wise of the Commons and other MPs to think, well, given the by-elections already being held, are we sensible in regarding as a punishment for that, suspending him for sufficient days that a recall petition could be instigated. It is, of course, possible at the end. It's perfectly possible the Parliamentary Commission will say, well, actually, I think Mr Farage is right. He might say, well, there's a genuine disagreement about the rules because we're talking about something that Mr Farage was paid before he became leader of Reform again, and he argues before he was minded to become a politician. There's been some debate about that, and that therefore there's a question of interpretation. So he might feel, well, actually, Mr Farage does need to fill the forms in, but maybe that's the end of the story. So we don't know whether there'll be a precipitation, but I think Mr Farage is probably hoping that this is going to put him out of pressure on MPs, because as it were, if they're arguing that this by-election was a farce, I think Mr Farage's response will now be forcing another one will be an even bigger farce. And we'll wait and see which of these arguments proves to be the more powerful.
We also heard from Mr Farage that he's not going to be attending the declaration. As an elections expert for the BBC, have you ever known of an occasion, by-election or a general election, where the candidate, presumably the winning candidate in this case, but in any case, the candidate hasn't actually turned up?
Certainly not a winning candidate. I can certainly quote you one instance. In Inverness, in the general election in 2024, there was a recount and it had to be delayed from the Friday to the Saturday. And the SNP candidate, actually the sitting MP, but who knew he was going to lose, couldn't attend. He already had a prior commitment. But, you know, it's very, very unusual. Of course, it's added to the drama of the night because, again, Mr Farage, with his remarkable ability to capture headlines, to make waves, is kind of, again, obviously partly linking this, you know what, I can't even feel safe going to account. He was talking about Anne Widdecombe and her obviously very horrendous apparent murder. It is, of course, some suggestion now that there's a link between that and some incident at Mr Farage's home. Obviously, part of Mr Farage's story is, you know, why was I given £5 million before the general election? Well, actually, it was to pay for the security. And certainly anybody who's ever seen Mr Farage in action is aware that he's long had security, which is clearly privately financed. And part of his argument is that, look, it's personal because it's about my personal security. And that's why I think it doesn't need to be declared to the Commons authorities. But again, we'll wait and see what in the end the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards makes of all this. But you can see this adds politically to the argument he's trying to make.
OK, so John Curtis, for the moment, thank you very much. It's just gone 11 minutes past 3 here in the UK. And the news that we have here on the Clacton by-election is that Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, who triggered that by-election by stepping down as an MP so that vote could happen. He stepped down just a month ago. Well, he has declared victory. He spoke in front of supporters in Essex. And the other crucial point that he made is he said that he'd been advised by Essex police that there'd been an organised campaign to disrupt the election. And for that reason, he said, he's not going to attend the declaration. Now, we are in touch, BBC News, with Essex Police to try and confirm and verify and get a bit more information about that claim made by Mr Farage. The other thing he said about why he's not going to be at the count, he said, I'll be damned if I'm going to stand on a stage and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. But of course, none of the main political parties, the establishment in Mr Farage's eyes, decided they were going to contest this by-election, calling it a stunt, saying it was a waste of taxpayers' money as well. As John Curtis was saying just then, though, in some ways, Mr Farage will say that this apparent result, of course, we're still waiting for the official declaration, will somewhat vindicate his decision to call for that by-election. Well, let's discuss all of that in a bit more detail. I'm joined still by Tim Burrows, a journalist who's done a lot of work on Clacton. What did you make of that victory speech, I guess is the only thing we can call it, before we've actually had a declaration from Nigel Farage?
I have to say, it's one of the most arrogant pieces of political theatre I've seen in my life. It's very Trumpian, actually. And I can't help but think that a lot of the people in the constituency of Clacton that I've been speaking to in the last few weeks, this is the exact type of thing that they complained about with him. He seems to want to speak to, his content creative team, his social media, but he doesn't seem to want to go to some of the more awkward places in the constituency,
But Tim, in the end, if his declaration of victory hours before the official declaration is to be believed, then he actually says he's done better than in 2024. So despite all of the things you've said from the people you've spoken to, the voters at the ballot box overwhelmingly backed Mr Farage.
I mean, they do, but he would have known that. I mean, Clacton, I mean, it does vote to the right. It has done for years. We're going through, and nationwide, we're going through an anti-establishment moment. There doesn't seem to be, Andy Burnham might change this, perhaps not in Clacton, but there don't seem to be the politicians kind of talking directly to people, particularly working class people. And that's where, you can't, as much as I criticise Farage for that sort of pomposity of that speech, he has identified where his voter base is, and it's in Clacton. If you add the fact that the main parties aren't running against him, I mean, this election's been like shooting fish in a barrel. There's nothing that impressive about it. It's a bit like a seaside kind of silly season escapade. More than an election.
I'm just going to bring Sir John Curtis in to assess what you've just said then. What do you make of what Tim's just said about this election?
Well, I think the problem that Tim has to face is at the end of the day, despite the attempts of Mr. Farage's principal political opponents to say that this by-election is a joke, it's a farce, it's a stunt, and that he shouldn't have been calling it, that in the end, 44% of the voters of Clacton have turned out, and reportedly most of those have voted for Mr. Farage. And to that extent, at least, the stunt has perhaps worked out rather better than certainly his political opponents had anticipated. And that although perhaps in some ways, I've already said, the original decision to call the by-election certainly seems to have cost Reform support across the country as a whole, it doesn't at the end of the day seem to have demonstrated much evidence that the voters of Clacton are unhappy about having Mr. Farage as their MP. And, we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, this is the one constituency that voted for a UKIP MP in 2015. It's the constituency with the 5th highest Leave vote in the 2016 EU referendum. Most supporters for Reform are Leave voters. Support for the party is currently running at over 40% amongst those people who voted for Leave. This is just the kind of constituency we expect Reform to do well. And to that extent, at least, at the end of the day, why did Mr. Farage call the by-election? Because he knew he was going to win. And I think, frankly, we knew he was going to win, even as principal political opponents did stand. They've tried to deny him, as it were, the fruits of that likely victory. But I'm not sure that in the end that their position hasn't ended up backfiring, basically because of the level of turnout.
Tim, I wanted to get your thoughts on what you heard there from John then.
I think it's more about the next election, whenever it may be, and Farage is kind of standing in that among voters. Even in Clacton, there was a more in common polling recently that I heard on a podcast, that was talking to Reform voters in Clacton, and there were quite a few who were concerned about the financial scandals and whether they could trust him. And I just wonder if you're kind of acting so arrogantly not to turn up to the count itself, whether that's a great look in a constituency where, the constituents are already saying Nigel Farage isn't turning up to surgeries, whereas every other MP in the country seems to be able to do that.
I think on that point, Tim, we just have to have a bit of caution. Of course, we at the BBC, I'm sure other news organisations are also trying to establish the truth of that claim from Mr. Farage. But if it is the case that Essex Police said that there was an organised campaign to disrupt this announcement this evening, then he does have on that point at least a very legitimate reason and a security reason not to turn up. Of course, we are looking into that at the moment.
I don't know the ins and outs of that. I just guess if he does want to seem authentically, with the people of Clacton, the test is probably the election after this, and whether, his attitude towards them, it's a bit of a snub today. But one thing that I'd kind of want to move on to about Clacton is, it's quite a deprived place and it needs a lot. If you see the area around the pier, there are hotels there that, have seen better days. They're talking to the people trying to survive through the cost of living crisis, trying to keep their businesses afloat. And, if you ask them, does it seem like you're getting much help from people like Nigel Farage? And that and they say no. So I guess there's just a general, feeling in Clacton that, OK, we'll give you a chance. It's like a roll of the dice, really. So here's a chance and show us what you can do. And so that's the test for him, I think.
Indeed. And of course, you've spent a bit of time in Clacton throughout the campaign. Obviously, Mr Farage says he has an overwhelming victory. We'll, of course, wait for that officially to be announced in the next couple of hours. But what do you think were the biggest issues, or what were the biggest issues that people spoke to you about, given what you said about the area? And what do you think Mr Farage needs to do to try and unite people that have different views to him in that area?
That's a really good question. Migration is a big issue to people, although actually levels of migration in the constituency are quite low. But I think that's kind of a national conversation. But, people are just struggling, especially I've mentioned it before, the constituency of Jaywick. Jaywick's often has documentaries made about it. I mentioned it recently in the Guardian article that, it has probably double the amount of people with disabilities there, purely because it's actually a very cheap place to live. You can buy a house very cheaply, you can rent very cheaply. And that means the needs of Jaywick are kind of perhaps a little bit different to other more sort of middle class constituencies. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Frinton, which, is fairly well off. So the needs there are probably different. And I think Farage's base is, a mixture, really. Frinton, I think he likes to kind of visit the rugby clubs and the cricket clubs there. And I met a lot of people in Frinton who actually did have stuff to say about Farage's sort of financial scandals and the by-election. But they couldn't really see an alternative. So he's, in terms of the needs of Clacton, it's a real mixed bag, and I think there's quite a lot of confusion at the moment as to, what Farage could even do as an MP, and it comes down to simple things like potholes, as well.
It often does, doesn't it? Elections always come down to potholes, don't they? Tim Burrows, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and expertise on the area at heart here. Well, let's hear more from Nigel Farage. As I told you, about half an hour or so ago, he took to the stage at an event in Essex, not actually at the counting centre in Clacton, where he declared victory, saying that he had won that by-election, which of course he triggered just a month ago. Well, during that speech, Mr Farage said that he won't be attending the declaration for that by-election. Let's have a listen to what he said.
I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time. And once again it shows you the sheer intolerance, the sheer loss of fundamental democratic principles that those that went before us fought in world wars to fight for and preserve. And this shows you why the battle that we're engaged upon in this great party, in this great movement of ours, is to get this country back to the values that it needs to be. And so I regret to say, and by the way, I'm not scared of these people, far from it. But I'm damned if I'm going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory, a ringing endorsement of all that I've tried to fight for and you try to fight for, and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. And I will not, sadly, be attending the count, which means I'm going to be here all night.
He's calling it Farage Fest, and there's a fairground, a big wheel and all kinds of things there as Reform UK supporters celebrate his apparent by-election win. I should say apparent because at the moment, of course, the returning officer has not yet stood on the stage and declared the results. I'm still joined by the BBC's election expert, John Curtis. You can see on the screen there those votes still being counted, John, because they're very long ballot papers. I've never seen anything like it. It's a record, isn't it?
It was a record number of candidates. We've got 34 candidates standing this by-election. The previous record, well, it's that Horton Price and Howden by-election again.
You give me a pound for every time you say that.
But there's a very interesting story here. In the Horton Price and Howden by-election, when they had 26 candidates, the returning officer got permission to exceptionally, rather than having all of the candidates named one above the other in just one column, he was given permission to arrange the candidates in 2 columns, thereby halving, or more or less halving, the length of the ballot paper. And I think it's interesting that the returning officer in tendering perhaps wasn't aware of this precedent from 20 years ago as to what you might do in an election with a very large number of candidates. But as we can see seen there with those pictures, you know, one of the reasons why we might still be waiting for this at breakfast time, let alone at dawn, is because of the difficulty just literally handling these ballot papers that are so long. And you've got to look at one of each of 34 boxes to work out which is his vote for, and then you've got to put it in one of 34 piles, whereas usually it's around 6 or 7 piles you have to deal with.
Lots of piles. You've got lots of piles there as well. We
yes.
will continue to chat to you about what's written on your bits of paper in a moment, so don't go away. We will be back with more, as Nigel Farage has declared himself already the winner of that by-election. More to come. Don't go away.
Hello there. Thursday was a scorcher across parts of England and Wales. We saw 38.1 Celsius reached at Kew Gardens in London, making it the new highest temperature of the year so far. Friday's hot again towards the southeast, but it is starting to cool down behind this cold front, which will very slowly edge southwards and eastwards. But ahead of it again, you can see the red and orange colours indicating some pretty high temperatures, though not as hot as it was on Thursday. So more cloud across Scotland, Northern Ireland, even northwestern England into western Wales. As we head into Friday afternoon, 1 or 2 showers, the odd heavy one, but another very hot, dry, sunny one. Midlands, southern, southeast England, low to mid-30s. Temperatures coming down a little bit further north and west. Now, as we head through Friday night, we'll see variable cloud, a few showers around. There's just a chance we could see some heavy, maybe thundery showers graze the far southeast, although most places will stay dry. Another warm and muggy one for England, Wales, but turning fresher in the north and west. For Saturday, we've got a ridge of high pressure overhead, so that'll kill off most of the showers. So it's mostly dry with sunny spells, variable cloud, most of the cloud across Scotland, perhaps an odd passing shower here. Temperatures are coming down further in the north and west, and a little bit cooler for England and Wales, closer to where we should be for the time of year. It's up to around the mid-20s. As we head into next week, there are signs that low pressure may make a rare appearance. It looks like most of the rain will be in the north and the west, with very little again in the south.
Climate change is transforming our lives and our planet. We discover how and why.
We break down the science, explore smart solutions, and hear from people and businesses on the front line.
Join us for The Climate Question on BBC News.
Ukraine is warning it is running out of missile interceptors, and this is the cost, the scene of the latest Russian missile attack. We've seen 8 body bags having to be removed from here. I'm Dan Johnson. Join me for continuing coverage of the war in Ukraine on BBC News.
Five years after the Taliban took power, they're still in charge in Afghanistan. But this country confronts a humanitarian crisis. Girls and women are shut out of education and most jobs. What's life like under Taliban rule? Join me, Lise Doucette, and our teams for special coverage on BBC News.
This is Zoe. She is my eldest daughter. She was forcibly removed when she was 9 years old.
Who else is this going to happen to? We didn't know whether we had managed to seal and clean any of the places where the poison had been.
There's a number of casualties that were discovered when they built the highway. We're doing this not for medical legal reasons, but for remembrance, for memories, for families.
Sport is out of reach for many girls in India, but it holds the promise of a different life.
Documentaries from around the world. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Start with a question, a concern, a frustration. The things that don't seem right, the things that don't add up, the things that need fixing or explaining. Dentists, bus routes, bills, or potholes. You could get lost in a pothole that size. Send us your question through BBC Your Voice. We look into it, then it becomes BBC News. Email, a message, a video upload. It can start with you and your voice. Search BBC Your Voice to have your say.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Nigel Farage claims an overwhelming win in the Clacton by-election, but says he won't attend the declaration.
I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time.
Counting of the votes is still underway in Clacton, with the winner expected to be declared before sunrise.
A Reform UK spokesperson tells me there were credible threats against Nigel Farage to explain why he is not attending the count tonight.
Also ahead on BBC News this morning, as the UK records its hottest day of the year, homes are destroyed and a child and 3 firefighters are taken to hospital. It's as several fires rage across the West Midlands. A major incident's declared and 2 people seriously injured as a passenger train derails in East Sussex.
It's going to be Amy Hunt. Adeleke finishes quick. 22.
And Britain's Amy Hunt won her second gold medal in the 200-metre sprint at the European Athletics Championships. Good morning, I'm Regina Vaidyanathan. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage claims he secured an overwhelming victory in the Clacton by-election as counting continues. Well, this by-election in Clacton in Essex was triggered last month. It's after Mr Farage resigned from the seat he won in 2024 amid an investigation over his finances. While speaking in the last hour to a crowd of supporters of his party in Essex, Mr Farage says he secured a victory against what he called was the establishment.
On the hottest day of the year, in the middle of August, in holiday season, we have secured far more votes than we got in the general election of 2024. And in doing so, we have beaten the candidate for the Unity Party. Yes, there were Liberal Democrats, Labour and Conservative canvassers out canvassing for Count Binface. What an upside-down world it is, where Count Binface is now the candidate of the establishment. I mean, you literally couldn't make it up.
Nigel Farage there, claiming victory, of course, before the result of that by-election has been declared. Well, I'm joined by Harry Farley, who is at the counting centre in Clacton. Harry, one of the things that Mr Farage said, which is probably one of the most significant, isn't it, is that he's not actually going to be attending the declaration. He says it's because there was a credible threat that was conveyed to him by Essex Police. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, well, Nigel Farage said that he'd been told by Essex Police that there was a plan to disrupt and degrade the result, and he said that he didn't want to be humiliated when he stood alongside the 33 other candidates here tonight. Subsequently, since that statement, because Nigel Farage didn't actually mention anything about a threat or anything like that, but subsequently since that statement, we have got a statement from Reform UK spokesperson. They say that there was a credible threat against Nigel Farage. So let's bring in Jamie McIver. He's a Reform UK spokesperson. Hopefully you can shed some light on this. So was it that Nigel Farage didn't want to be humiliated, or was there a threat against him?
I think, first of all, I'd like to just say thank you to the wonderful people of Clacton who have clearly help Nigel Farage beat the establishment once again with what appears to be a very impressive result for Nigel.
And the counting is still going on.
And the counting's there. We've obviously seen the turnout, and there are lots of indications to suggest that the people of Clacton have sent a huge message to the establishment. But on your point that you've made, Nigel's obviously made that decision, and if you listen to what Nigel said, he doesn't want to be demeaned or humiliated, and I make him right in that, but also to demean or humiliate the winning candidate in any election demeans and humiliates all of those people that have gone and taken part in the process. And so I think it's obviously the right decision that Nigel has taken, I'm sure, alongside his team as well.
Were you aware of that decision before you turned up at the count tonight?
What I do know is that Nigel Farage is...
Were you aware of it?
This is, of course, what Nigel Farage is exceptional at, which is politics. And Nigel Farage, this is his first ever by-election was 33 years ago, and today he is obviously going to hopefully be sent back to the House of Commons to represent the people of Clacton. I'm sure you can appreciate that as a local councillor here in Essex, I'm not told exactly what the leader of my party's moves are all the time, but I'm very, very happy to support this decision, because Nigel would not have made that decision lightly. And of course, why should the people of Clacton be demeaned or humiliated? Because there are some nobodies here that may wish to cause trouble.
But help us to understand the reasoning behind Nigel Farage's decision. I take your point about being a local councillor, and so maybe not being privy to all the details, but help us understand it, because Nigel Farage talks about not wanting to be humiliated, but then a Reform spokesperson talks about a credible threat from Essex Police. Which is the reason? Can you help us understand that?
Well, of course, since Nigel has made his speech, there has been that statement from Reform, and the statement speaks for itself. Nigel has made that decision, of course, in consultation with various different stakeholders, as the statement from our spokesperson says. So I think it's quite clear, really. I don't think this needs to be made into more than it is. Nigel has made that decision. And you know what? Having spent time campaigning here in Clacton for a while now during this election campaign, I know for a fact that the people of Clacton are disgusted with the way in which the establishment media, the mainstream media, the political class of this country have tried to demean and humiliate their Member of Parliament. And a big part of why I believe Nigel will have a successful election this evening is because the people of Clacton are standing by their Member of Parliament, and they wouldn't want to see him in any way demeaned or humiliated, as Nigel has said.
What would you say to those who say that there's a strong police presence here? If you go out any of the doors, there are members of the police here to protect all the candidates and all the people here as well. What would you say that there is a strong police protection here, and that Nigel Farage is disrespecting the voters, disrespecting the process by not turning up? What would you say to those who make that argument?
Well, Nigel Farage is not disrespecting any process, because he has actually been the person to give the people of Clacton the opportunity to judge him on his record, and tonight those people will speak. Nigel has nothing but respect for the people of Clacton and this constituency that he loves to serve, and I very much hope in a few hours he'll be sent back to the House of Commons to continue to serve without what could have been a very pathetic attempt by some absolute nobodies to try and degrade what is a very important democratic process. Nigel's made that decision, and I think our party's statement speaks for itself.
All right, Jamie McIver, local Essex councillor for Reform UK. Thank you for your time. Regina, in the last moment or so, we've heard from Ian Davidson, who's the chief executive of the council here. He said that they work with Essex Police, they work closely with Essex Police and have done throughout the process. And he said the counting is continuing, is safe to continue. There's no reason why that will stop. So counting ongoing behind me. Nigel Farage has declared victory, despite the fact we don't know the result. I don't think that was ever in really any doubt, but he has said that he will not attend the count, and a Reform UK spokesman said there was a credible threat against him.
OK, Harry Farley at the count. Thank you very much for the moment. We will be back with Harry throughout the coming hours for more updates. It's just gone 3:38 here in the morning, and Professor Sir John Curtis is still in the studio with me, still looking very refreshed.
Very kind of you.
We are looking at on many levels, a very unusual by-election. I mean, we just discussed there with Harry what Reform UK say is a credible threat to Nigel Farage. That's why they say he's not going to be attending the declaration. Of course, we are clarifying, or trying to clarify that with Essex Police. But there are many other ways that this was a by-election like no other, weren't there?
Yes, or at least one can only think of one precedent. I mean, the first thing one should say is that in general, it is unusual for politicians to stand down and then fight the subsequent by-election. Outside of Northern Ireland, at least, it's only happened on 10 occasions since the end of the First World War. And in 8 of those occasions, it happened because the MP in question had changed party and thought, therefore, they should stand down and fight. Indeed, that's exactly what Douglas Carswell did when he switched from Conservative to UKIP, then the MP for Clacton, and precipitated the by-election in Clacton, which he managed to win. By the way, on most occasions when MPs have done that, they've actually lost. But the one person who did something very, very similar to what Nigel Farage has just done is David Davis, then the Shadow Home Secretary for the Conservatives, subsequently became a minister in the May and Johnson governments. Now, he was particularly concerned about proposals that were going through the House of Commons at that time, under the Gordon Brown's government, to extend the length of time that people who were being suspected of terrorist offences could be held without charge by the police. And if I remember rightly, it was to extend that period to as long as 42 days. In the end, by the way, it didn't happen. The House of Lords blocked it. But David Davis, who's always had a particular concern about civil liberties, felt this was unacceptable. And without consulting David Cameron, as then party leader or whatever, he announced he was standing down. He was going to fight a by-election on the principle of this issue. Now, what happened? Well, funnily enough, number one, the other principal parties decided not to stand in the by-election, including, by the way, UKIP, then led by one Nigel Farage. The second thing that happened was that people said, this is a farce, just as this happened with this by-election. And the third thing that happened is that people said, this is a waste of money, as in this by-election. The arguments about what Nigel Farage has done are frankly nothing new. They were exactly played out nearly 20 years ago.
Let me ask you about the money, because it's estimated that to put on this by-election it cost around £250,000, and you've certainly got some of the opposition parties that decided not to contest it, saying it was a political stunt and a waste of money.
Yes, that indeed is their argument. It's precisely the same arguments that the political parties other than the Conservatives, who frankly themselves weren't very happy about David Davis' decision, used back in 2008. We can get, in exactly the same way, right? We can guarantee it every time an MP decides to change the party that they represent, there is always a cry, stand down and fight the by-election, but usually it does not happen. These things get constantly recycled in our politics. Now, the point is that actually in Halton Price and Howden, David Davis won comfortably. He's got 72% of the vote, so that's one potential marker to look out for. Can Nigel Farage do as well as David Davis? What we do know, however, already is that 44% turnout is greater by about 10 points than what happened in Halton Price 20 years ago. OK, so John Curtis, thank you very much for the moment. Let's go straight back to Clacton and my colleague Harry Farley, who is still in the room where it's all happening still. We can see there those very long, 34 candidate long ballot papers are still meticulously being counted. Harry, I believe you've got someone interesting to talk to now.
Yeah, well, the ripples of that announcement from Nigel Farage that he's not going to be attending, those ripples are sort of going around the room. And one person who we can talk to about it is Ian Davidson. He's the chief executive of the local council here, also the returning officer, so in charge of running this election. Ian, Reform UK spokesperson has told me that there was a credible threat against Nigel Farage. Did you know about that?
So all I'm going to say to you is today is we work very closely with Essex Police. We have done throughout the process of the election. The Essex Police have appointed an Assistant Chief Constable as Gold Command. A very senior officer is here, and including plainclothes police. So I am very happy in terms of completing this count safely, and we will continue. It is up for any candidate who does not want to attend. That's entirely up to them. And I won't comment on whether they do or they don't, but I will continue, and I've reassured my staff here tonight and all those who are attending that I will complete this election safely and declare as and when the count's finished.
So when you say you're confident that you can complete this count safely, are you confident, and have you always been confident in the safety of all the candidates who might turn up here?
So what I would say is that the Essex Police have supported us in trying to ensure that our candidates are safe. We have again checked tonight after the announcement to ensure that all the candidates, the different things we put in place are still in place and are still make the count safe.
And I understand you have to be careful about what you reveal about details of security, of course, but you're confident, you're saying you're confident that had Nigel Farage turned up tonight, he would have been safe.
All I'm saying is I'm not going to comment on any specific security issues that we've had. There has been a number of security issues during the course of this election, which we have dealt with, and I'm going to say to you but we've got security in place to complete this count effectively and safely.
Okay, so and just let me press you one final time. Are you confident that had Nigel Farage turned up tonight, he would have been safe tonight?
I don't know what else he knows in terms of for his own personal safety, but for our candidates who are here tonight, I'm confident that we can complete this count safely.
All right, Ian, thank you for your time. Can I just ask you more broadly then about this election and about some of the challenges that you've had in organising it and putting it together? You've talked in the past about the extra cost that's involved with running this record-breaking number of candidates. Explain that to us.
Yes. So in terms of, if you can see, 34 candidates, it's the highest number of candidates there's ever been in a parliamentary election. And the ballot paper, which is almost a metre long, I can hold it to my hip and it hits the floor, which means we've had to work out how to count differently. Our staff have done a superb job. And actually, one of the things we've seen tonight is, for the general election, we what's called verified. We checked the number of ballots in the box are the same as the presiding officer said, and we were within 25 minutes of finishing that tonight, which is only 25 minutes additional considering the size of the ballot papers. We're now in the process of doing the final count. We've divided them into 4 so that effectively they're like normal sized ballot papers, and then we'll bring the number back together. So it will take longer than it normally does, but certainly I'm extremely proud of the staff and the way they have worked tonight. It has been phenomenal, and actually it has been a very unusual election for all sorts of different reasons over the course of the last few weeks.
One final thought, the turnout of 44%, was that higher than you expected?
Well, it's varied actually, because at one stage we thought that with by-elections it's sometimes down, but during the course of the day we've seen quite a few queues at polling stations, but overall it is down from the general election. So it was difficult to tell. The postal votes turnout held up, I would say, to pretty nearly. It's a little bit down, but not significantly down. But overall, I think perhaps people were going out earlier to vote because of the nice weather, rather than perhaps doing the normal 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, which is often the time people do. And of course, children are not at school, so it's not waiting till the end of school to go and vote. So.
And if you had to put money on it, what time do you think we'll get a result here tonight?
Oh, good question. I'm hoping around 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, very good. Ian Davidson, Chief Executive of Tendring District Council and Returning Officer here running this election. Thank you very much for your time. So as I say, the ripples of that announcement from Nigel Farage that he won't be here, and that a spokesperson for him has told us that a credible threat was made against him as an explanation for why he will not be coming. But as we was reporting earlier, he has declared victory already. Counting is still going on behind me, and as you heard there, expecting the results around 6 a.m.
OK, Harry Farley, thank you very much for the moment. And of course, we are still trying to determine the nature of that threat to Mr Farage from Essex Police. We'll let you know when we hear from them. Now let's take you to these pictures live in Japan, in the Chiba prefecture. Police in Japan are saying that 4 people have died in floodwaters. As you can see there, the waters are rising. Comes after unprecedented heavy rainfall in the area. Now, that particular Chiba prefecture is east of the capital, Tokyo. Well, the heavy rain has left several thousand people stranded at Narita Airport in Tokyo, and many trains to and from the airport have also been cancelled. Well, Japan's meteorological agency earlier issued a maximum level alert for landslides, and evacuation orders have been issued for more than 400,000 people. And there were also power outages, with thousands of homes without electricity there as well. So that breaking news is that torrential rain, record high rain, has left at least 4 people dead, 5 injured and 1 person still missing. And for the first time in Chiba, Japan's weather authority has issued a level 5 warning. Well, that's the highest alert level. Let's stay with the extreme weather, and multiple fires have been burning across the West Midlands, forcing some people to flee after flames ripped through their homes on what was the hottest day of the year here. Well, the West Midlands Fire Service says it's facing extreme levels of demand in the market town of Stourbridge, where a child and 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital. Our Midlands correspondent Navtej Johal has the latest.
The images are horrifying. West Midlands Fire Service says there are multiple houses on fire in Stourbridge. It initially described this as an extensive grass fire near Stourbridge Golf Course, which started just before 1:30 this afternoon. About 100 firefighters have been tackling it, with flames spreading across roads in some places. The fire service says this blaze has several points of origin. Residents in the area have been left terrified for their homes.
I went out with a hose pipe trying to damp the fence down, but it didn't make any difference. It was just so quick, and it was 10 foot, 12 foot high. It was way above me. I tried to stay there as long as I could, but it overpowered me in the end, so I had to come in.
Unsurprisingly, people are having to be evacuated from nearby homes. This is one of several fires in the West Midlands today. 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital while tackling blazes in the region, along with a child. The fire service says it's currently facing extreme levels of demand. This was the scene in Sandyford in Stoke-on-Trent, where 4 homes have been destroyed. These sorts of incidents have been an increasingly common sight this hot and dry summer. In Norfolk, a major incident has been declared by the fire service.
Significantly busy year, probably going to prove to be one of our busiest on record, if not the busiest. The summer in particular has been a several month-long period of really high call volume.
Firefighters aren't the only emergency staff struggling in the heat. England's A&Es are experiencing their busiest period ever, and the record-breaking heat is a key part of the problem. In Nottingham, staff and patients are suffering at the city's biggest hospital, the Queen's Medical Centre.
Down in outpatient clinics, we did have a period where it was so hot down there, the air conditioning couldn't keep up, and so when that broke, it was dangerous levels of heat down there.
Meanwhile, 13-year-old April, who has a rare condition that means she has to limit her water intake to just 500 millilitres a day, is finding conditions especially tough.
I've been here 2 days and it is absolutely roasting in here. If I have, say, 100, say if I have a last pop and it's like 100 mils of liquid, then maybe I'll have 400 mils of water, so it's not great.
In Ilford in East London, the water supply is slowly being restored to 10,000 homes after 5 days of dry pipes.
Not being able to shower, not being able to even drink water. I'm having to be in a queue for hours to get water. It's been terrible.
Few expected to ever go through these experiences or see these images in the UK. But now many will question whether this will become the norm. Naftesh Johal, BBC News.
Let's remind you of our main story, and that is that Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, has claimed victory in the Clacton by-election. Speaking to supporters of Reform UK a short while ago, he said he's won that by-election. Although the official result has yet to be declared, votes continue to be counted in Clacton. The other main piece of information from that speech by Mr Farage was that he's not going to be attending the declaration. Reform UK telling the BBC that they believe there is a credible threat, which is why he is not attending. A credible threat at Mr Farage at the count itself. Well, my colleague Harry Farley, who spoke to the returning officer, didn't get huge amounts of clarity about what the details of that apparent threat are, because the returning officer did tell him that he believed that if Mr Farage was to attend the count, he believed everything would be safe. We're still trying to get more information from Essex Police about what Mr Farage has said, just to get more clarity there. But he also said he wasn't going to be attending the account. He said, "I'll be damned if I'm going to stand on stage and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies." And that is, of course, because none of the main political parties decided to field a candidate. But impressively, there are 34 candidates on the ballot paper. You can see on the box beside me, I should say, the length of the ballot papers. This is a record number of candidates for a by-election here in the UK, and that is actually why the counting is taking a little bit longer. We are expecting to get that result before sunrise, we are being told. And of course, the main headline there is that Nigel Farage has already declared a win, and he is celebrating with supporters of Reform UK and what has been dubbed Farage Fest. He says he's not going to be attending the count. He said he was advised by Essex Police that there was an organised campaign to disrupt the result. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello there. Thursday was a scorcher across parts of England and Wales. We saw 38.1 Celsius reached at Kew Gardens in London, making it the new highest temperature of the year so far. Friday's hot again towards the southeast, but it is starting to cool down behind this cold front, which will very slowly edge southwards and eastwards. But ahead of it again, you can see the red and orange colours indicating some pretty high temperatures, though not as hot as it was on Thursday. So more cloud across Scotland, Northern Ireland, even northwestern England into western Wales. As we head into Friday afternoon, 1 or 2 showers, the odd heavy one, but another very hot, dry, sunny one. Midlands, southern, southeast England, low to mid-30s. Temperatures coming down a little bit further north and west. Now, as we head through Friday night, we'll see variable cloud, a few showers around. There's just a chance we could see some heavy, maybe thundery showers graze the far southeast, although most places will stay dry. Another warm and muggy one for England and Wales, but turning fresher in the north and west. For Saturday, we've got a ridge of high pressure overhead, so that'll kill off most of the showers. So it's mostly dry with sunny spells, variable cloud, most of the cloud across Scotland, perhaps an passing shower here. Temperatures are coming down further in the north and west, and a little bit cooler for England and Wales, closer to where we should be for the time of year. It's up to around the mid-20s. As we head into next week, there are signs that low pressure may make a rare appearance. It looks like most of the rain will be in the north and the west, with very little again in the south.
There is nothing like driving into a moving story and not knowing what is going to happen. When we entered Damascus, it was full of rebels shooting in the air in celebration.
You can hear the sound of celebratory gunfire.
Nobody knew what was going to happen, and I live for those moments.
These troops are heading into the battle zone in Khartoum, says the army, to carry out a special operation.
Entering Khartoum after the Sudanese army recaptured it was a seminal moment. The level of destruction was stunning.
It was the largest market in Sudan, but you can see the level of destruction now.
When things become volatile and unpredictable, it's crucial to stay focused.
There's a standoff between police and protesters here after another police shooting of a black man in Minnesota.
Sometimes meeting someone on the ground can change how you understand a story. I'm thinking of a number of women that I met in Sudan talking about the hardships they experienced. Covering these stories over the years has impressed upon me how resilient people are. And yes, many of them are desperate and exhausted, but many of them are also steadfast, they're gracious, and they're generous. Journalism is about being there as events unfold and telling people not only what happened, but why it matters and what it means. History happens in real time, and someone needs to be there to witness it.
Women. We make up half the world we inhabit, yet take up half the space we deserve. Told we talk too much, yet never heard enough. Told lower your voice, be spoken over, be silenced, be invisible. Women, natural-born storytellers, pearls of wisdom, fighting talk, heart to hearts, all mother tongues, speaking up, speaking out, speaking truth to power, quietly active or loudly roaring. Every woman has a story to tell. Let's hear them. Global Women, a series of inspiring stories across the BBC. Watch on iPlayer.
Live from Singapore, this is BBC News. Palestinians in a besieged village in the occupied West Bank are told to leave their homes during a military operation to remove Israeli settlers. At least 4 people are killed as historic rainfall hits Japan, triggering landslides and power outages. Air India announces plans to start testing all its pilots for banned substances after a captain involved in a mid-air incident reportedly tested positive for marijuana. Lawmakers in the US demand answers from the Pentagon about poor conditions aboard an aircraft carrier in the Middle East, with reports of food shortages and suicide attempts. And Nigel Farage claims victory in a highly unusual by-election. The Reform UK leader says he won't attend the result after police told him about an organised campaign to disrupt the declaration. You're watching Newsday, I'm Vandana Barn. We begin in the Middle East, where the Israeli military has ordered a dozen Palestinian households to evacuate their homes in the occupied West Bank as they conducted a military operation to remove settlers who were besieging families in their homes. The West Bank is Palestinian territory, but currently under Israeli military occupation, with Israeli civilians living there too. The besieged Palestinian families are in the village of Kusra. Overall, an estimated 3.3 million Palestinians live across the territory, while over 500,000 Israelis are in settlements and outposts, which are illegal under international law. John Donnison has spent the day in Kusra and sent us this report.
Overnight, Israeli military bulldozers moved in. They flattened the illegal encampments known as outposts, from which Jewish settlers have been laying siege to 2 Palestinian families for 5 days. But within a few hours, the settlers were back, the siege still on. One of the houses is owned by a Palestinian American, Louis Abu Rida, who lives in the States. His family are surrounded and trapped inside.
As of now, my brothers and other families is scrambling, not sure what's going on. What's really matter to everybody and to me that how come the settlers able to walk freely around the house as we speak right now, and there's hundreds of IDF soldiers in the area.
And at the same time, Israeli forces raided the main village of Kusra and took over around a dozen Palestinian houses, putting their owners out on the streets. It's now about 10 hours since the Israeli forces raided the village of Kusra. You can see it's very, very quiet. They occupied these houses up on the hillside behind me and told the families to leave. Now, some of the families have been allowed to go back, but the soldiers are still inside others, and we've seen them up on the rooftops. We met Kaher Ode, one of those kicked out. He said the Israeli military was targeting not the settlers, but Palestinians who they should have been protecting.
I was asleep in the morning, my brother and I. They came in and broke down the door, shouting, "Open up, open the door." Even now, I still can't process what I saw in front of me. There was more than 20 of them, maybe 30.
The settler violence in Kusra has drawn criticism from the government here and also from Israel's greatest ally. The US ambassador, Mike Huckabee, a supporter of Jewish settlement expansion, called it Israeli terrorism. But such violence is happening on a daily basis, and neither the Israeli government, its military, or America have been willing or able to stop it. John Donnison, BBC News in Kusra, in the occupied West Bank.
Some breaking news now. Record rainfall in Japan's Chiba prefecture has killed 4 people and left thousands stranded overnight at Tokyo's Narita airport. Now you're looking at some live pictures out of Chiba prefecture, which sits right next to the capital city of Tokyo. It has recorded more than 100 millimeters of rain per hour since Thursday afternoon. That's about 3 times the average rainfall in August and the highest volume of precipitation ever recorded in the country. So those are live pictures there, and we'll bring you more information on this as and when we get it. Now, Air India is set to test all of its pilots for banned substances with immediate effect. The new requirement comes days after an incident in which an Air India flight suddenly lost altitude, with a preliminary report saying the senior pilot had to retake their substance test. Reports say the captain had tested positive for marijuana. Existing rules require at least 10% of pilots to be tested at random. Well, joining me now is our correspondent in India, Arunday Mukherjee. Arunday, just get us across these new tests, these new measures and the timing of it.
Well, the timing is very significant, Vandana, as you point out. A lot of questions will be raised as to why Air India is currently announcing this decision to check all Air India pilots for substances, whereas the earlier rule mandated just 10% at random testing. This obviously is going to be pegged to what happened last week in that flight coming in from Phuket to Delhi, which suddenly lost altitude to the tune of 300 feet. It is currently an ongoing investigation spearheaded by the Aircraft Incidents Investigation Bureau. They haven't come to any kind of conclusion yet, but there have been some preliminary reports and a lot of source-based reporting which have suggested that one of the pilots failed the substance test, which is why they had to retake that test. Some source-based reports are also suggesting that he tested positive for marijuana, even though there is no official confirmation in that regard. No one has said this clearly at all. But this is certainly going to raise a lot of questions as to why Air India has decided, and those who are trying to piece together what exactly happened and the circumstances leading up to it will certainly be looking at this very, very closely. Air India essentially communicated this to its staff in an internal memo in which the thrust of the message from the top brass was that Air India must secure, protect, and uphold the trust that it has managed to earn over decades of service for India. It used to be India's flagship carrier. It is very well known. It is owned by the Tata company. It needs to ensure that it has the same trust and commands the same trust. But like I said, Air India has been under intense scrutiny in any case ever since that tragic air crash that took place last year on that flight which was taking off for the UK from Ahmedabad. It crashed soon after takeoff. That investigation is still pending. The final report has been delayed repeatedly, now expected sometime in October. So obviously this further adds to the headaches and the worries that have been cited as far as Air India is concerned. So this is an ongoing investigation, a lot more expected from the details that the investigations will find in the course of time.
Aruna, they really appreciate you getting us up to speed and putting all of that into context for us. In the UK, Nigel Farage claims he has won an unusual by-election where all the major parties have refused to field candidates. The Reform UK leader told supporters that he won't attend the result announcement after police told him about the described as organised campaign to disrupt the declaration. Take a listen to what he's had to say.
I called this by-election because I wanted the people of Clacton, the voters of this constituency to be my judge, not the mainstream media in Britain and the political establishment who paint us out to be criminals and bad people every day.
Now, votes are still being counted in the contest, which was triggered by the Reform UK leader after he resigned his MP seat in July amid investigations into his finances. He denies any wrongdoing. Farage is running uncontested by the UK's main parties, but that hasn't stopped a record-breaking total of 34 candidates from standing, from independents to Social Democrats and the Reclaim Party. And famously, Count Binface. He's a comedian and author known for his garbage bin costume, who says he hopes to appeal to disillusioned voters. His platform includes abolishing the House of Lords, banning the eating of noisy snacks in cinemas, and scrapping VAR in football. Our political correspondent Harry Farley is in Clacton with the latest on the vote count.
Well, I've been speaking to here in Clacton in the last few days, or from political parties in Westminster. Everyone expects Nigel Farage to win, and to win pretty comfortably, really, tonight. In the last few minutes or so, we've got the official turnout, so the proportion of voters who could have voted, the proportion of eligible voters who have turned out, that's at 44%. That is higher than some had expected. It's almost as high as some really prominent and closely fought by-elections in recent memory in British politics, like the Runcorn and Helsby by-election, for example, like in Gorton and Denton in Greater Manchester. So a lot of people, or a lot more people than some had expected, have decided to come out and to vote. And for Reform UK, they argue that is good news for them. And they are sounding pretty chipper. I've been speaking to people inside Reform UK, and one of them, a Reform source, told me in the last few minutes that if Nigel Farage wins by more votes tonight than he did in 2024, then his decision to call this by-election against the establishment will be vindicated. So they are suggesting, it seems, that they are confident that Nigel Farage will win tonight by more than he did in 2024. Obviously, there were much more votes cast in 2024 because that was a general election rather than this by-election, so a lot more people knew about it and turned out to vote. I suppose the obvious pushback to that source in Reform UK is that the other major parties aren't standing here, whereas they were in a general election. Instead, the main rival, really, or at least the most prominent rival that Nigel Farage is facing is, as you say, a comedian known as Count Binface. And in the last few minutes, I spoke to him and asked whether he was now the establishment party.
Well, it's in a way, it's a compliment to, how many? 8 weeks ago, I scored 0.2% of the vote against Andy Burnham in Makerfield. Nobody was calling me the establishment then. And now, just 8 weeks later, let's just say I get 5% of the vote. That's a 2,500% swing to Binface, hashtag swing bin. And so suddenly I'm the face of the establishment. However, I would argue, Harry, that someone who has been an MP, been an MEP, who is one of the chief architects of Brexit, and one of the dominant figures in British politics over the last 20 years, and is reputedly a member of the East India Gentlemen's Club, which apparently does not admit women, I would say that's arguably slightly more establishment than a lone wolf space warrior with a CFAX fixation. But you know what? It's up to you.
Count Binface there giving me his response to that allegation from Reform UK that he is now the establishment candidate. The counting is going on behind me now, 35,401 verified votes, we've just been told in the last few minutes. So that process is underway. It is slower than it would usually be, simply because of how many candidates are on the ballot paper. The ballot paper is nearly a metre long, and so that will take longer to go through each one. So we're not expecting the results for quite a few hours to come.
Now we'll be back with more, including the fast-spreading Ebola outbreak in the DRC. Do stay with us. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. You're live with BBC News. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo has spread to a sixth province, just a day after the head of the World Health Organization said the outbreak was on track to surpass the deadliest in history. The current outbreak has killed 2,100 people out of more than 4,500 cases. Well, for more on this, we can speak to Dr. Javed Abdelmonem, International President of Doctors Without Borders or Médecins Sans Frontières. It's really great to be able to speak to you, Javed, about this. Look, 3 months into this outbreak, what are teams and workers on the ground telling you about what the situation is currently like in the DRC?
Thank you for having me, Vandana. This is, as you've mentioned, clearly an outbreak that is on track to be the largest ever. It's had alarming numbers really since the 30-day mark. It is still not under control, and it's still ever increasing with new provinces and health zones coming onto the radar every day. What we're seeing in the treatment centers that we're running is that we have patients presenting late. We also have patients presenting who were not already on the contact tracing list. Now, part of surveillance and contact tracing and part of control of an outbreak such as this is to know exactly who are the contacts of those patients who have Ebola, to monitor them, to get to them early and have them to come to treatment early. And that sort of breaks the transmission train. Now, we're having a 90% rate of unknown contacts coming to treatment centers. So this shows you that surveillance isn't where it needs to be and contact tracing isn't where it needs to be. If you don't have those things under control, for all the testing and all the beds and all the community engagement that you can do, it won't come under control. And a factor of this is to do with the fragility of the healthcare system in an already long affected by conflict area of Eastern DRC. So surveillance and general healthcare is something that isn't up to scratch in this part of the country. And I really want to call one thing into absolute focus. While the Ebola outbreak is not yet under control and a massive ramp up is required internationally to support, there is still ongoing outbreaks of measles, ongoing outbreaks of cholera, and access to healthcare in general in this part of DRC must be assured.
Yeah, we'll get to that international, the aid there, but just talking about in our intro, we did say that this is now spread to a sixth province. What's the risk here of this spreading beyond borders and having a bigger outbreak in the region?
Well, listen, I mean, when it was first declared back in mid-May, there was already a spread to Uganda. With any form of infectious disease, there is a risk of spread. Let's also be clear, compared to respiratory spread of viruses, we all have experienced COVID recently. It's relatively hard to spread Ebola globally, right? It needs to have contact with the fluids of a patient who's been infected. Now, the issue with closing borders and trying to contain it in that way is that it has a perverse outcome, not only to disrupting or even delaying and slowing humanitarian and health response in moving supplies and staff to where it needs to be, it also drives people underground. People then will not declare that they have symptoms, or they will still try to move to where they need to move because life must go on. And it has a perverse outcome. So actually closing borders, shutting down, quarantining, doing things against and without the community involved and understanding are actually have perverse outcomes of, while even if you might reduce transmission today, you'll still have a longer and worse outbreak in the long run.
And just briefly, what is needed right now from the international community?
What we need is the attention here. This is a dramatic outbreak. And for even with the best intention and will of the Ministry of Health in the DRC, World Health Organization, Africa CDC, all the agencies, the issue here is that we need more of everything. And that's a really difficult thing to call for when we feel that a response has been mounted. But it is clearly still spreading at alarming rates. A crucial aspect of this is the community engagement, and it links to the provision of other healthcare services.
Yeah.
This is the context of chronic conflict and under access to healthcare.
Yes, Dr.
The new
Javed
funding.
Abdulmonem, I really do appreciate you taking us through that and putting that into context for us. International President at Médecins Sans Frontières. Now, in the US, some Democratic lawmakers are demanding answers from the Pentagon after reports that US military personnel on the USS Lincoln in the Middle East are facing increasingly harsh living conditions. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said those reports were completely misrepresented. Reports from earlier this week claimed widespread food shortages and broken plumbing have resulted in a mental health crisis for multiple sailors on board. The USS Lincoln hasn't docked at a port for more than 250 days. Eleanor Watson, CBS reporter covering the Pentagon, has more on the conditions aboard the USS Lincoln.
The families of some of these sailors are very concerned and have been vocal about it. They, in a town hall last week with the acting Secretary of the Navy, voiced them. At one point during the event, we're told that a spouse read a text message from her husband that essentially read, "I don't want to wake up tomorrow." That is certainly concerning. There has been at least one report of a sailor going overboard earlier this month. That incident is being investigated. We don't know the circumstances of why or how the sailor went overboard, but it comes amidst these reports about mental health concerns. I spoke to another spouse connected with her who did not raise mental health concerns, but did talk about the food shortages. She said that earlier in the deployment, there was a time when they were running low on food and had to ration some of the specific items, but that has been resolved. Her bigger concern right now is just how much longer is this deployment going to go on? Remember, they're now in the 9th month of this deployment that's typically 6 months.
South Korea's Football Association has apologized over allegations that officials used association credit cards to pay for sexual services for foreign referees more than a decade ago. The payments, worth thousands of US dollars, were allegedly disguised as expenses for food and massages. Our Seoul correspondent Jake Kwan has the details.
Well, the KFA is certainly having its worst time. I think the South Korea's football world is being shaken more than ever in its history after the 2016 government report has come to light. And according to the report, between 2011 and 2012, in the 12-month period, there was a regular bribery of the international referees who were visiting. At least 19 international referees who were visiting had been bribed by KFA. They were taken to massage parlors in Gangnam district where they were provided sexual services. And this action was approved by the upper management of the KFA. This is what the report reveals. And it was paid for by the company card, which suggests how regular and how standard this practice was. Now, KFA, the association, had apologized, saying that they have distressed and upset and disappointed Korean football fans, and that this was an old practice and it is no longer done. But that was not enough to make this anger go away. Many fans have, for many years, have alleged that the Football Association has been making backroom dealings, picking the coaches and managers, and there was general corruption inside the association. They have been calling for more transparency and audit into the association. And this report, it largely confirms some of the suspicions that these fans have held. And especially now, after the reputation of the KFA is at the rock bottom after that dismal performance in the last World Cup where the Korean football team had failed to advance to the knockout stage. You know, the chairman of the KFA had to resign, the head coach had to resign, and the South Korea's president, Lee Jae-myung, had ordered a government investigation into a possible corruption into the KFA. Now, this is going to might be even a larger scandal as what that investigation could reveal.
And finally, on a lighter note, let's turn to Japan, where the 2026 World Yo-Yo Contest is underway. Professional yo-yo players from all over the world are gathering to compete in multiple contests. So, how do you win? Well, according to the International Yo-Yo Federation, judges score contestants' routines on both technical execution and freestyle evaluation. Well, I spoke to former US Yo-Yo World Champion Gentry Stein in Himeji about how the competition is shaping up and how he got into the sport.
We were here at the 2026 World Yo-Yo Contest in Himeji. Now, I started yo-yoing when I was just about 8 years old, and it's been a long journey of being obsessed with yo-yos. And there's a lot of people here who are also the same. So here, players are competing to win a world title. I actually retired from competing myself after winning 2 world titles. So now I'm here representing my brand, Yo-Yo Champion, and mentoring my 2 sponsored players who are looking to win their first world title this year in Japan.
Look, we talked about that they're judged on technical execution, freestyle evaluation. What does this mean?
Yeah, so the judging criteria is actually very, very complex. So as you can see here, I'm doing lots of tricks, all in a short amount of time. And the tricks all have different variations. Now, the judges are required to analyze these tricks in real time, and they're scoring you by giving you points for how difficult the tricks are and how many tricks you perform, as well as your body movement during the tricks. If you can perform them in a way that is elegant and smooth, they're also looking at your musicality and how cohesive your performance is as a whole.
We are absolutely in awe with this in the studio here right now, Gentry. I mean, just what's the how many people are there with this competition?
Well, quickly, I can show you in the room really quick. So I'm just outside of the competition here. Now, just inside right here is the main convention room. There's then the secondary stage room, which you'll see just at the top here, but I'll actually take you in to see a couple of my team members from the Yo-Yo Champion team who are doing some of the world's top tricks right now. You can see right here.
Phenomenal. And we can see some other Yo-Yo Championship ones doing some tricks there. And, you know, if you can just keep panning that, Gentry, we're going to end our show on this. And it's phenomenal seeing some of those yo-yo tricks, and obviously much better than what we can do. This is great to see. And this is happening in Japan, this Yo-Yo World Championship. Now, for those in the UK, we have a special coverage of the Clacton by-election. And for those around the world, Business Today coming your way.
Hello there. Thursday was a scorcher across parts of England and Wales. We saw 38.1 Celsius reached at Kew Gardens in London, making it the new highest temperature of the year so far. Friday's hot again towards the southeast, but it is starting to cool down behind this cold front, which will very slowly edge southwards and eastwards. But ahead of it again, you can see the red and orange colours indicating some pretty high temperatures, though not as hot as it was on Thursday. So more cloud across Scotland, Northern Ireland, even northwestern England into western Wales. As we head into Friday afternoon, 1 or 2 showers, the odd heavy one, but another very hot, dry, sunny one. Midlands, southern, southeast England, low to mid-30s. Temperatures coming down a little bit further north and west. Now, as we head through Friday night, we'll see variable cloud, a few showers around. There's just a chance we could see some heavy, maybe thundery showers graze the far southeast, although most places will stay dry. Another warm and muggy one for England and Wales, but turning fresher in the north and west. For Saturday, we've got a ridge of high pressure overhead, so that'll kill off most of the showers. So it's mostly dry with sunny spells, variable cloud, most of the cloud across Scotland, perhaps an odd passing shower here. Temperatures are coming down further in the north and west, and a little bit cooler for England and Wales, closer to where we should be for the time of year. It's up to around the mid-20s. As we head into next week, there are signs that low pressure may make a rare appearance. It looks like most of the rain will be in the north and the west, with very little again in the south.
5 years after the Taliban took power, they're still in charge in Afghanistan, but this country confronts a humanitarian crisis. Girls and women are shut out of education and most jobs. What's life like under Taliban rule? Join me, Lise Doucette, and our teams for special coverage on BBC News.
With America's midterm elections looming, the president's power is being tested at home and abroad.
The cost of living and the war in Iran have put pressure on those here at the White House.
The stakes are high for Republicans and Democrats and for the American people.
For the latest, follow us on the president's path here on BBC News.
Climate change is transforming our lives and our planet. We discover how and why.
We break down the science, explore smart solutions, and hear from people and businesses on the front line.
Join us for The Climate Question on BBC News.
The wash of blue, that colour of nature, the seas, the sky, it is so immersive.
If you are fully in the moment, you are totally responding in the moment to everything that's happening. And when you're doing theatre, that can change night after night. It's a living, breathing, active thing.
I suppose to the outside world, the most visible part of the London Film Festival is the red carpet. And this year it brought out some of the biggest names in the film industry.
I think there is too little architecture in this world.
We desperately need places that bring peace, that bring positivity.
Inspiring arts and culture. Watch on iPlayer.
As extreme weather conditions intensify across Europe, wildfires have caused widespread destruction and mass evacuations, with the heat wave set to continue in many places. See the latest headlines as they happen, with breaking news alerts in the News app, and stay informed with live updates on bbc.co.uk. Follow the story with BBC News.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Nigel Farage claims an overwhelming win in the Clacton by-election, but says he won't be attending the declaration.
I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time.
Well, counting of votes is still underway in Clacton, with the winner expected to be declared before sunrise.
Nigel Farage argues he won't be here, and a Reform UK spokesperson says there was a credible threat against him.
Also ahead on BBC News at 4:30. At least 4 people have been killed as historic rainfall hits Japan, triggering landslides and power outages. As the UK records its hottest day of the year, homes are destroyed and a child and 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital as several fires rage across the West Midlands. A major incident's declared and 2 people are seriously injured as a passenger train derails in East Sussex. Hello, I'm Regina Vaidyanathan. The Reform UK leader Nigel Farage claims he secured a convincing, overwhelming victory in the Clacton by-election as the counting of votes continues. Well, this by-election in Clacton in Essex was triggered last month. It was after Nigel Farage resigned from the seat that he won in 2024 amid an investigation over his finances. Well, speaking just over an hour ago or so to a crowd of Reform UK supporters in Essex, Mr Farage said he won't be attending the Count Centre because of what he described was an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result. He said he'd spoken to Essex Police about that. We're still trying to get more from Essex Police from them too. Well, the returning officer has been speaking to the BBC and he said he's confident that the count can be completed safely. We'll hear from him in a moment, but first let's have a listen to some of what Nigel Farage had to say.
On the hottest day of the year, in the middle of August, in holiday season, we have secured far more votes than we got in the general election of 2024. And in doing so, we have beaten the candidate for the Uniparty. Yes, there were Liberal Democrats, Labour and Conservative canvassers out canvassing for Count Binface. What an upside-down world it is, where Count Binface is now the candidate of the establishment. I mean, you literally couldn't make it up. I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time. And once again it shows you the sheer intolerance, the sheer loss of fundamental democratic principles that those that went before us fought in world wars to fight for and preserve. And this shows you why the battle that we're engaged upon in this great party, in this great movement of ours, is to get this country back to the values that it needs to be. And so I regret to say, and by the way, I'm not scared of these people, far from it. But I'm damned if I'm going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory, a ringing endorsement of all that I've tried to fight for and you try to fight for, and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. And I will not, sadly, be attending the count, which means I'm going to be here all night.
A victorious Nigel Farage there, but Harry Farley, our political correspondent, is at the count. As we heard there, Mr Farage says he's not going to be turning up to hear that declaration, which I think we're expecting in the next couple of hours, aren't we? You've been speaking to the returning officer and Reform UK. Just tell us what they've both been saying about what we heard from Mr Farage there about why he says he doesn't think it's safe to go to the count.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just have to sort of explain here, because as you heard, Nigel Farage there said he didn't want to be humiliated, that there was a plan to disrupt and denigrate the result. But then after that speech from Nigel Farage, I got a text from a Reform UK spokesperson who said that Essex Police advised Nigel not to attend the count tonight due to a credible threat against him. We were in touch with Essex Police to try and understand a bit more about what the nature of that threat was, whether they could give us any details, and all they would do is point us towards a statement made by Ian Davidson. Now, he's the returning officer, so the official kind of in charge, a council official in charge of running this vote. He said he wanted to reassure everyone that it was safe to proceed, and a few minutes ago I had a word with him and asked him what more he could tell us.
All I'm going to say to you is today is we work very closely with Essex Police. We have done throughout the process of the election. The Essex Police have appointed an Assistant Chief Constable as Gold Command. A very senior officer is here, and including plainclothes police. So I am very happy in terms of completing this count safely, and we will continue. It is up for any candidate who does not want to attend. That's entirely up to them. And I won't comment on whether they do or they don't, but I will continue, and I've reassured my staff here tonight and all those who are attending that I will complete this election safely and declare as and when the count's finished.
So when you say you're confident that you can complete this count safely, are you confident, and have you always been confident in the safety of all the candidates who might turn up here?
So what I would say is that the Essex Police have supported us in trying to ensure that our candidates are safe. We have got again checked tonight after the announcement to ensure that all the candidates, the different things we put in place are still in place and are still make the count safe.
And I understand you have to be careful about what you reveal about details of security, of course, but you're confident, you're saying you're confident that had Nigel Farage turned up tonight, he would have been safe.
All I'm saying is I'm not going to comment on any specific security issues that we've had. There has been a number of security issues during the course of this election, which we have dealt with, and I'm going to say to you but we've got security in place to complete this count effectively and safely.
Okay, so and just let me press you one final time. Are you confident that had Nigel Farage turned up tonight, he would have been safe tonight?
I don't know what else he knows in terms of for his own personal safety, but for our candidates who are here tonight, I'm confident that we can complete this count safely.
All right, Ian, thank you for your time. Can I just ask you more broadly then about this election and about some of the challenges that you've had in organising it and putting it together? You've talked in the past about the extra cost that's involved with running this record-breaking number of candidates. Explain that to us.
Yes. So in terms of, if you can see, 34 candidates, it's the highest number of candidates there's ever been in a parliamentary election. And the ballot paper, which is almost a metre long, I can hold it to my hip and it hits the floor, which means we've had to work out how to count differently. Our staff have done a superb job. And actually, one of the things we've seen tonight is, for the general election, we what's called verified. We checked the number of ballots in the box are the same as the presiding officer said, and we were within 25 minutes of finishing that tonight, which is only 25 minutes additional considering the size of the ballot papers. We're now in the process of doing the final count. We've divided them into 4 so that effectively they're like normal sized ballot papers, and then we'll bring the number back together. So it will take longer than it normally does, but certainly I'm extremely proud of the staff and the way they have worked tonight. It has been phenomenal, and actually it has been a very unusual election for all sorts of different reasons over the course of the last few weeks.
One final thought, the turnout of 44%, was that higher than you expected?
Well, it's varied actually, because at one stage we thought that with by-elections it's sometimes down, but during the course of the day we've seen quite a few queues at polling stations, but overall it is down from the general election. So it was difficult to tell. The postal votes turnout held up, I would say, to pretty nearly. It's a little bit down, but not significantly down. But overall, I think perhaps people were going out earlier to vote because of the nice weather, rather than perhaps doing the normal 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, which is often the time people do. And of course, children are not at school, so it's not waiting till the end of school to go and vote. So.
And if you had to put money on it, what time do you think we'll get a result here tonight?
Oh, good question. I'm hoping around 6 o'clock.
So the returning officer there, Harry, clearing up some of the confusion around that question of Nigel Farage's safety and security if he were to attend the count. He says he's not going to. He's at another event in Essex, celebrating, of course, before that official result has come in. You asked the returning officer there that it's going to be coming in at around 6 o'clock, but are you getting any more indications? It looks like the activity behind you slowed down a bit from earlier hours.
Yes, I think we might be slightly earlier than 6 potentially. You're right, the activity has really slowed down. The candidates were just called over a few moments ago to check through spoiled ballot papers to check they were essentially happy with that. So we might be looking at a result slightly earlier than 6. And then, of course, becomes the question of what the result means, what we can interpret from it, what it seems to be. I think we can be confident in saying a victory for Reform UK, and a comfortable one at that. And I think, in all honesty, there is a limit to how much we can read into that. Reform UK will use it to say that this sends a message to the political class, to the establishment, that the voters don't care about the questions about Nigel Farage's finances, and they will try to move the conversation on to the topics that they want to talk about. And yet, assuming Nigel Farage wins, that parliamentary investigation will resume again as soon as he's an MP. So those questions about his finances are not going away.
OK, Harry Farley, thank you very much for taking us through the very latest at the count. So, yeah, we'll keep watching the clock and see when that returning officer stands on the stage with the candidates. Well, I'm joined in the studio by Professor Sir John Curtis, the BBC's election expert. There's a lot to digest. The first question I think many of our viewers will want answering is, how does Nigel Farage know he's won when the returning officer hasn't yet stood on the stage and announced it?
OK, we need to go back to the beginning of the count at 10 o'clock this evening. What happens, the first stage of the count, is that the ballot papers are brought in from all of the polling stations, and the boxes are opened one by one and the number of ballot papers in each box is counted in order to check that the number of ballot papers in the box is the right number there should be and nothing's gone wrong along the way. As that is done with the ballot papers face upwards. And so therefore, if you've got a lot of people standing over the counters as they're going through this process, then you can attempt to start to make a tally of how many of votes do you think you have got on the papers you've been able to see. So this is a very standard procedure. Parties, in theory, parties are allowed to have lots of people standing over the counters to make sure that they're satisfied the count's being conducted properly. But the process does also make it possible for them to get a pretty good idea of who's won. And I think if, as we're anticipating, Mr Farage has got maybe around 2/3 of the vote, who knows, and nobody else has got that much, it's kind of not going to be very clever, as you see all these ballot papers coming up, that Mr Farage has won the election.
And Mr Farage there speaking to supporters. We played a bit of his speech just a few minutes ago, saying that he's done better than he did in 2024 when he first won the seat.
Yes, well, what he means by that is that in 2024 he got 21,225 votes, and he is claiming that he's going to get more than that this time, and therefore he's using that as a benchmark of the justification of his argument that, look, I've put myself before the voters of Clacton, and I've got even more people to vote for me than did 2 years ago. So why am I still going to potentially be pursued over the fact that I perhaps haven't filled in a form quite properly, which is the way he's now putting it. Other people might put it slightly differently, and that therefore, the idea of another by-election is frankly nonsense. I've done it for you, and the answer is clear. Now, one can debate all of that. One can certainly say the only other benchmark we can give, because the only other occasion when somebody has done what Nigel Farage has done is back in 2008 when David Davis, the then Shadow Conservative Home Secretary, stood down in Halton Price and Howden and fought the by-election as a Conservative. Most of the parties did not stand against him. He actually managed to get 72% of the vote. So we might say Mr Farage really wants to demonstrate that he really has managed to assuage all doubts about his continuing popularity in the constituency. He might want to get past that benchmark.
He might say that, but of course, as you pointed out quite correctly, that parliamentary investigation into finances and this £5 million donation, that continues on. There is a possibility then, I'm asking you this question rather than stating it, is there a possibility that we could see another by-election soonish?
It's possible. If the Parliamentary Commission for Standards, comes to the conclusion that Mr Farage should have declared this donation when he became an MP, because anything you get that seems potentially relevant to your politics 12 months before you get elected should be declared. If he decides that, and B, that the breach of the regulations is sufficiently egregious that he thinks that Mr Farage should be suspended from the House of Commons for a significant length of time, and the Standards Committee, which is a committee of MPs, say, yes, we agree with the Commissioner, and they vote and recommend to the House the suspension. Well, the House of Commons has to vote for the suspension, but in that event, under the Recall of MPs Act of 2010, then automatically the returning officer, whom we've seen a certain amount tonight, will have to make it possible for people to come into the town hall or whatever and sign a form that says, I want a by-election because Mr Farage has been found to have broken the rules. And if a sufficient number of people, I think it's about 10% of the electorate, say they want a by-election, we have another by-election. But I think we need to bear in mind here, we don't know what view the Parliamentary Commission for Standards will come to about whether or not Mr Farage has broken the rules, and even if he does, what he might recommend in the way of a punishment, quote unquote, for Mr Farage. The opposition party, or the opponent, Mr Farmage's opponents, are kind of presuming that Mr Farage did break the rules and that indeed the Parliamentary Commission for Standards will recommend a lengthy suspension. I think one has to say at this stage that is a presumption on their part which may, but may not, prove to be accurate.
John, there have been lots of peculiarities, things that have been very unusual about this by-election. Some of them because, of course, Mr Farage triggered that by-election himself. He said he wanted the voters to decide rather than what he described as the establishment. But what he describes as the establishment didn't contest this election, did they? We didn't see any of the major political parties and even Restore contest this. That was the same in Halton Price and Howden, wasn't it?
Yes, when David Davis stood down and precipitated the by-election, the opposition parties felt this wasn't really appropriate. There were arguments then about this is a waste of money. There were arguments too about this is a farce, because indeed we then had 26 candidates standing together with David Davis, including a number of relatively eccentric characters. So a lot of the arguments that we've heard about the Clacton by-election were played out on that occasion. And, you know, one has to say that it's not necessarily regarded as was a particularly happy precedent. Mr Davis did it without the approval of his party. In case of reforms case, it's different. Now, I think that perhaps the difference here is this, is that there was never any possibility at that point that Mr Davis was thought to have broken the rules of the Commons. He was protesting about attempts to try to lengthen the period of time that people who are suspected of a terrorism offence could be held without charge by the police.
Totally different circumstances.
Totally different. Now, I think the point about this is Mr Farage, in a sense, is trying to say to MPs and by implication to the Commissioner on Standards, look, OK, you guys think I've broken the rules, so I'm going to ask the voters for you. You've now got your answer, so you shouldn't be going any further. Now, the Commissioner will carry on with his investigation, whether or not it will in any way colour his judgment about what punishment Mr Farage should get if indeed he does think that Mr Farage has broken the rules. Well, maybe we'll never know. But clearly one of the potential problems that will now face the Committee on Standards is that if indeed the Parliament Commissioner does recommend a lengthy suspension, then Mr Farage will say, whose farce is it now? I've had the by-election, you said that was a farce. Now you're going to have another one. That's an even bigger farce. And to that extent, at least, Mr Farage is clearly trying to use the by-election to bolster his political position, given the controversy about this particular donation.
That's certainly why he is celebrating this evening, isn't it, John? We'll be back with more from John in a moment. And of course, there is a QR code that you can also scan on the screen in a moment, where you can stay on the story as well while you continue to watch us, of course, where we have regular updates. But let's just bring you some other main news that we're following here as well. And multiple fires have been burning across the West Midlands, forcing some people to flee after flames ripped through their homes on the hottest day of the year. The West Midlands Fire Service says it's facing extreme levels of demand in the market town of Stourbridge, where a child and 3 firefighters were taken to hospital. Our Midlands correspondent Navtej Johal has the latest.
The images are horrifying. West Midlands Fire Service says there are multiple houses on fire in Stourbridge. It initially described this as an extensive grass fire near Stourbridge Golf Course, which started just before 1:30 this afternoon. About 100 firefighters have been tackling it, with flames spreading across roads in some places. The fire service says this blaze has several points of origin. Residents in the area have been left terrified for their homes.
I went out with a hose pipe trying to damp the fence down, but it didn't make any difference. It was just so quick, and it was 10 foot, 12 foot high. It was way above me. I tried to stay there as long as I could, but it overpowered me in the end, so I had to come in.
Unsurprisingly, people are having to be evacuated from nearby homes. This is one of several fires in the West Midlands today. 3 firefighters have been taken to hospital while tackling blazes in the region, along with a child. The fire service says it's currently facing extreme levels of demand. This was the scene in Sandyford in Stoke-on-Trent, where 4 homes have been destroyed. These sorts of incidents have been an increasingly common sight this hot and dry summer. In Norfolk, a major incident has been declared by the fire service.
Significantly busy year, probably going to prove to be one of our busiest on record, if not the busiest. The summer in particular has been a several-month-long period of really high call volume.
Firefighters aren't the only emergency staff struggling in the heat. England's A&Es are experiencing their busiest period ever, and the record-breaking heat is a key part of the problem. In Nottingham, staff and patients are suffering at the city's biggest hospital, the Queen's Medical Centre.
Down in outpatient clinics, we did have a period where it was so hot down there, the air conditioning couldn't keep up, and so when that broke, it was dangerous levels of heat down there.
Meanwhile, 13-year-old April, who has a rare condition that means she has to limit her water intake to just 500 millilitres a day, is finding conditions especially tough.
I've been here 2 days and it is absolutely roasting in here. If I have, say, 100, say if I had a glass pop and it's like 100 mils of liquid, then maybe I'll add 400 mils of water, so it's not great.
In Ilford in East London, the water supply is slowly being restored to 10,000 homes after 5 days of dry pipes.
Not being able to shower, not being able to
even drink water. I'm having to be in a queue for hours to get water. It's been terrible.
Few expected to ever go through these experiences or see these images in the UK. But now many will question whether this will become the norm. Naftesh Johal, BBC News.
20 people have been injured, 2 of them seriously, after a train derailed in East Sussex on one of the busiest commuter routes in southern England. The Southern Rail train came off the track between Haywards Heath and Eastbourne, just outside Lewes, while 3 carriages ended on their sides. Network Rail said it's working with the Rail Accident Investigation Branch to work out what happened. Well, the Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander says she's deeply concerned by the incident. Well, let's return to our main story, and that is the results of the Clacton by-election, which we are still officially waiting for. Let's go back to the Count Centre and join Simon Dedman, political reporter for BBC Essex. Well, Mr Farage has already claimed victory, but just tell us what's going on at the count at the moment.
Well, at the moment we are coming up to the final stages here. They're looking at a few of the ballots where there's some disputes whether they're going to actually discard them or count them. That's what's being discussed in the background here right now, that we're expecting a declaration around 6 a.m. at the moment. Things have gone perhaps a little bit faster with the count than was expected, not by much but by a little, and of course this is because it has been logistically a lot more difficult by the sheer size of the ballot, which is nearly 1 metre long, and they had to double up the tables here to be able to handle it. And it has been a record-breaking by-election, not just with the number of candidates standing, not just with the length of the ballot paper, but this is probably the first election where the winner is now not going to be turning up, because we heard in the last hour from Nigel Farage that he is not going to be coming here. He said in a speech at an event that's been dubbed Farage Fest, a victory party for some of his supporters elsewhere in the Clacton constituency, where Farage says, "I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place here." And he says that he is not going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory with a ringing endorsement and stand there to be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. So he is not going to be here, but we are going to be having a declaration with many of the 34 candidates standing where I am, hopefully in an hour's time.
OK, Simon Dedman with the very latest in Clacton-on-Sea. Thank you for the moment. Don't go away. We'll have more coverage of that by-election. You stay with us on BBC News.
Hello there. Thursday was a scorcher across parts of England and Wales. We saw 38.1 Celsius reached at Kew Gardens in London, making it the new highest temperature of the year so far. Friday's hot again towards the southeast, but it is starting to cool down behind this cold front, which will very slowly edge southwards and eastwards. But ahead of it again, you can see the red and orange colours indicating some pretty high temperatures, though not as hot as it was on Thursday. So more cloud across Scotland, Northern Ireland, even northwestern England into western Wales. As we head into Friday afternoon, 1 or 2 showers, the odd heavy one, but another very hot, dry, sunny one. Midlands, southern, southeast England, low to mid-30s. Temperatures coming down a little bit further north and west. Now, as we head through Friday night, we'll see variable cloud, a few showers around. There's just a chance we could see some heavy, maybe thundery showers graze the far southeast, although most places will stay dry. Another warm and muggy one for England, Wales, but turning fresher in the north and west. For Saturday, we've got a ridge of high pressure overhead, so that'll kill off most of the showers. So it's mostly dry with sunny spells, variable cloud, most of the cloud across Scotland, perhaps an odd passing shower here. Temperatures are coming down further in the north and west, and a little bit cooler for England and Wales, closer to where we should be for the time of year. It's up to around the mid-20s. As we head into next week, there are signs that low pressure may make a rare appearance. It looks like most of the rain will be in the north and the west, with very little again in the south.
For a decade, I've been investigating maternity services, hospital after hospital, failure after failure.
She said it was just one-off, it was just one of those things, sometimes babies die. And when she left, I said to Gary, I said, something's not right.
Now in Nottingham, the biggest ever inquiry. The medical records of 2,500 families have been reviewed for instances of avoidable harm.
There have been many families who have not been told the truth. They were told for years by the Trust that was just bad luck. It was only you.
On Panorama, the mothers who weren't listened to.
As soon as she made the first incision, I screamed because I was in so much pain.
You would like to think that had they just learned that Quinn would be here and alive and well and be out playing.
Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Nigel Farage claims an overwhelming win in the Clacton by-election, but he won't be attending the count. Reform says there was a credible threat against him.
I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time.
As we come on air live at 5, counting of the votes continues. The winner could be declared in the coming hour.
Well, we are expecting a result in about an hour's time for this election that has broken many records, and another one might be that the winning candidate doesn't turn up for the declaration.
Also ahead on BBC News at 5 a.m. At least 4 people have been killed as historic rainfall hits Japan, triggering landslides and power outages. As the UK records its hottest day of the year, homes are destroyed and a child and 3 firefighters are taken to hospital as several fires rage across the West Midlands. A major incident's declared and 2 people are seriously injured as a passenger train derails in East Sussex. I'm Regina Vaidyanathan. A very good morning to you if you're joining us on BBC News and on BBC One. The Reform UK leader Nigel Farage claims he secured a convincing, overwhelming victory in the Clacton by-election as counting continues on. Well, this by-election in Clacton-on-Sea in Essex was triggered last month after Nigel Farage resigned from the seat he'd won in 2024 amid an investigation over his finances. Well, speaking just over an hour ago or so to a crowd of supporters of his party in Essex, Mr Farage says he won't be attending the declaration and the count centre because of what he's described as an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result. Well, the returning officer has told BBC News he's confident that the count can be completed safely. We'll hear from him in a moment, but first let's hear more of what Nigel Farage had to say.
On the hottest day of the year, in the middle of August, in holiday season, we have secured far more votes than we got in the general election of 2024. And in doing so, we have beaten the candidate for the Unity Party. Yes, there were Liberal Democrats, Labour and Conservative canvassers out canvassing for Count Binface. What an upside-down world it is, where Count Binface is now the candidate of the establishment. I mean, you literally couldn't make it up. I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time. And once again, it shows you the sheer intolerance, the sheer loss of fundamental democratic principles that those that went before us fought in world wars to fight for and preserve. And this shows you why the battle that we're engaged upon in this great party, in this great movement of ours, is to get this country back to the values that it needs to be. And so I regret to say, and by the way, I'm not scared of these people, far from it, but I'm damned if I'm going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory, a ringing endorsement of all that I've tried to fight for and you try to fight for, and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. And I will not, sadly, be attending the count, which means I'm going to be here all night.
Nigel Farage there, already declaring victory, but of course that official declaration has not yet happened. Let's go to Simon Dedman, BBC Essex's political reporter, who is at the Count Centre in Clacton-on-Sea. Simon, we've been watching pictures of that leisure centre very closely for the last few hours, and it does look like the activity seems to be slowing down. Are you getting a sense that the count could come quite soon?
Yeah, I don't think we're far off now. The actual counting has stopped. The discussions have stopped. I don't think it is going to be too long. We were being told probably 6 o'clock. It could be before that. We're just awaiting official confirmation if that is going to be held sooner. Of course, as we were hearing, the winner of this count is not going to be here. That we have not heard of happening before. That someone who's won a parliamentary election has then not turned up. Sometimes the people who've lost don't come up and hear the results, but never the winner. And we heard there from Nigel Farage saying that he had been told there could have been attempts to degrade his result by perhaps some of the other candidates. We have also at the BBC received from another Reform UK spokesperson that there'd been a credible threat against him at the count. We just have had from Essex Police in the last few moments an updated statement where Essex Police has said we have a proportionate and robust policing operation to ensure the safety and security of all participants at this count here in Clacton. Well, a little earlier, my colleague Harry Farley was talking to the acting returning officer Ian Davidson about the security and the count here continuing.
All I'm going to say to you is today is we work very closely with Essex Police. We have done throughout the process of the election. The Essex Police have appointed an Assistant Chief Constable as Gold Command. A very senior officer is here, and including plainclothes police. So I am very happy in terms of completing this count safely, and we will continue. It is up for any candidate who does not want to attend. That's entirely up to them. And I won't comment on whether they do or they don't, but I will continue, and I've reassured my staff here tonight and all those who are attending that I will complete this election safely and declare as and when the count's finished.
So when you say you're confident that you can complete this count safely, are you confident, and have you always been confident in the safety of all the candidates who might turn up here?
So what I would say is that the Essex Police have supported us in trying to ensure that our candidates are safe. We have got again checked tonight after the announcement to ensure that all the candidates, the different things we put in place are still in place and are still make the count safe.
And I understand you have to be careful about what you reveal about details of security, of course, but you're confident, you're saying you're confident that had Nigel Farage turned up tonight, he would have been safe.
All I'm saying is I'm not going to comment on any specific security issues that we've had. There has been a number of security issues during the course of this election, which we have dealt with, and I'm going to say to you but we've got security in place to complete this count effectively and safely.
Okay, so and just let me press you one final time. Are you confident that had Nigel Farage turned up tonight, he would have been safe tonight.
I don't know what else he knows in terms of for his own personal safety, but for our candidates who are here tonight, I'm confident that we can complete this count safely.
All right, Ian, thank you for your time. Can I just ask you more broadly then about this election and about some of the challenges that you've had in organising it and putting it together? You've talked in the past about the extra cost that's involved with running this record-breaking number of candidates. Explain that to us.
Yes. So in terms of, if you can see, 34 candidates, it's the highest number of candidates there's ever been in a parliamentary election. And the ballot paper, which is almost a metre long, I can hold it to my hip and it hits the floor, which means we've had to work out how to count differently. Our staff have done a superb job. And actually, one of the things we've seen tonight is, for the general election, we what's called verified. We checked the number of ballots in the box are the same as the presiding officer said, and we were within 25 minutes of finishing that tonight, which is only 25 minutes additional considering the size of the ballot papers. We're now in the process of doing the final count. We've divided them into 4 so that effectively they're like normal sized ballot papers, and then we'll bring the number back together. So it will take longer than it normally does, but certainly I'm extremely proud of the staff and the way they have worked tonight. It has been phenomenal, and actually it has been a very unusual election for all sorts of different reasons over the course of the last few weeks.
One final thought, the turnout of 44%, was that higher than you expected?
Well, it's varied actually, because at one stage we thought that with by-elections it's sometimes down, but during the course of the day we've seen quite a few queues at polling stations, but overall it is down from the general election. So it was difficult to tell. The postal votes turnout held up, I would say, to pretty nearly. It's a little bit down, but not significantly down. But overall, I think perhaps people were going out earlier to vote because of the nice weather, rather than perhaps doing the normal 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, which is often the time people do. And of course, children are not at school, so it's not waiting till the end of school to go and vote. So.
And if you had to put money on it, what time do you think we'll get a result here tonight?
Oh, good question. I'm hoping around 6 o'clock.
Well, we've got some breaking news to bring you in relation to that. So you just heard from the returning officer there. And remember, we heard from Nigel Farage, who's already declared victory in this result, saying that he had been advised by Essex Police that there had been an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result. And for that reason, he would not be attending the declaration of the result. Well, we've now had, in the last few minutes, a statement from Essex Police. I'm going to read it to you now. It says, we have a proportionate and robust policing operation to ensure the safety and security of all participants in the count. The force did not provide any details of any conversations with Nigel Farage related to the declaration, but it says it's understood that Essex Police did not advise any candidate that they should not attend the by-election count. So that is seemingly at odds with what we've heard from Nigel Farage. I'll just repeat that again. We understand Essex Police has not advised any candidate that they should not be attending the Clacton by-election count, which is due in the next 20 minutes to 30 minutes, we understand. Well, Essex Police said in a statement, we have a proportionate and robust policing operation to ensure the safety and security of all participants in the count. The force didn't, though, provide any details of any conversations it had had with Nigel Farage related to the declaration in Clacton. Of course, we also heard from Reform UK saying that there had been a credible threat to Mr Farage, and that is why he would not be attending that declaration. It's interesting what Nigel Farage talked about how he'd been advised by Essex Police. He also then said, I'll be damned if I'm going to stand on a stage and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. Let's go to the count floor and join our reporter, political reporter, Simon Deadman, who is there. Simon, that news just coming in to us from Essex Police. What more are you hearing there?
Well, that has basically been the biggest development that has taken place here. The police basically saying any candidate who wanted to attend could attend. That does really reiterate what we also heard from the acting returning officer, Ian Davidson, who said that any candidate who wants to attend here can attend, that this count has been safe. But the count itself, of course, now has finished. We are very close to wrapping up here and to a declaration. We haven't been given a specific time as to when that will be. The candidates themselves haven't been briefed yet by the acting returning officer, which usually happens just before they then announce when the declaration will be. So I think we still have a few more bits of admin, if you like, to take place. I can see the returning officer actually talking to some of the candidates on the other side of the room, and despite the fact that the winner isn't coming here and the winner has effectively, well, he has declared that he has won, even though we haven't had the official declaration yet, but most people are expecting Nigel Farage to be declared the winner of this by-election here within the hour. We are going to be having a fair number of the candidates actually still coming up, standing where we are to hear that declaration when it does indeed take place.
And Simon, let's just remind people of that breaking news, because the BBC understands that Essex Police has not advised any candidate that they shouldn't attend the Clacton by-election count, which is in that leisure centre where you are standing right now. They said we have a proportionate and robust policing operation to ensure the safety and security of all participants in the count. I mean, to be blunt, that's at odds with what we've heard from Nigel Farage.
Well, it's certainly different from what my colleague Harry Farley received in terms of a statement from Reform UK, where a spokesperson said there was a credible threat against him. Nigel Farage had said in the speech at this event described as being Farage Fest at another part of the Clacton constituency that he had been advised there was going to be an attempt to disrupt and to degrade the declaration result, and that Farage said he didn't want to stand up here with a bunch of nobodies who would effectively, he felt, be set out to try and humiliate him. And that's why he has said that he is staying with his supporters at this party-style victory rally, which has been going on overnight, as I say, in another part of the constituency where he gave that speech. But yes, Essex Police, in many ways, they're reflecting what the acting returning officer has said, which is that this count is safe, there is security in place, the count could continue safely, and it has done, and that any candidate who wants to attend could attend. The decision not to come is purely on them. So the police and also the acting returning officer saying very similar things.
OK, Simon Dedman, thank you very much for the moment, and it certainly does look like those tables look emptier. It looks like we are edging closer to a declaration. Well, I'm joined in the studio still by Sir John Curtis, the BBC's elections expert. A question many viewers will be asking is, how does Nigel Farage know he's won before the result's been declared?
He knows he's won because at the initial phase of the count, the ballot papers are shaken out of each ballot box, and there's a check made or that the number of papers in the ballot box is the same as the number that the person who was running the polling station says there should be. And that is done with the ballot papers face up, so you can see who people have voted for. So as the counters go through and count these ballot papers, if the parties are organised and they've got enough people in the count, they can stand over the tables because they've got the right to be able to see that the count's being conducted properly, but they can also start doing a tally of how many votes each candidate they think has got as they see the ballot papers being checked in front of them. So if they're doing that operation in a reasonably robust and resilient fashion, then they should be able to come up with a pretty good, accurate estimate of what the final result's going to be. And there's many a by-election in the past when you know, the party apparatchiks have been able to tell the journalists that, you know, we've won and we've got roughly this, and then, shall we say, there's some circumlocution used in order to avoid breaking the law about declaring the result too early. But yeah, we all get an idea of you know, how it, so for example in Makerfield, it was pretty clear, at least a couple of hours before the count, from what the various parties were saying, particularly when the parties agree about what they say, that actually we've got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Now, as we're coming towards the real count, maybe one thing that might be quite useful to do, given we know the number of ballot papers that are in the count, is to give people a couple of possible benchmarks. So as we hear the result declared, and there's going to be 34 of them, the two people in whom we are interested is obviously how well has Nigel Farage done, and secondly, how well has Count Binface done. Now, if not, just to, so 70% of the votes that are in the count would just be over 24,700. Okay. So if Mr. Farage has got much more than that, he may have done somewhat better than David Davis did back in the Horton Price and Howden by-election back in 2008. In the case of Count Binface, if he's going to get 20%, which is what one poll suggested he might get, he's going to have to get just over 7,000 votes. So that's a kind of couple of numbers just to have in your head, or maybe write down as you listen to the count, and you can then, as it were, before you've even got time to get your calculator out, get a rough idea of, roughly in terms of the share of the vote, what we anticipate are the two leading candidates, how well they've done. What I will also do next time we talk is to work out what 5% is, and then you can work out how many of the candidates have lost their deposits.
Okay, yeah, 500 quid, right?
Yeah, but of course, one of the issues I think maybe this by-election does raise, it's been 500 quid for a very, very long time. And to that extent, it's maybe one of the questions we should be raising is, well, actually, maybe should the amount of the deposit go up? Because it's not kept up in line with inflation. And this perhaps would help to reduce the extent to which we have candidates who are unserious in the sense that they don't really have the resources to campaign, etc., in a significant fashion in the by-election, and thereby ensure that voters have got a choice that they can deal with. But anyway, that obviously, there's actually legislation going through the House of Commons at the moment, and it's possible they could put a last-minute amendment into that, but I've not heard anybody suggest that's what's going to happen. And
there's lots of unusual things about this by-election. We could write a long list of them, as long as perhaps the ballot paper, couldn't we, John? We discussed some of the political things behind it, haven't we, with our reporters at the count. But in terms of the electoral maths of all of this as well, we're talking about 34 candidates here, and that's hugely unusual. But the key thing is none of the main parties are contesting this. Yes, no.
They basically within hours of Nigel Farage saying that he wanted to hold this by-election, the parties evidently made the calculation, we're not going to play your game. We're not going to attempt to give the credence of legitimacy that our participation would give to this exercise. And in a sense, therefore, they're trying to say, look, you know, you're trying to anticipate the possibility that there might be a recall petition that would lead to a by-election. We don't think that's right. You should be following the rules and the standard procedures, and you're in a sense trying to bypass them. So they were doing that in order to try to undermine the credibility of the by-election. I think one of the questions they face, from what we already know, the turnout is just over 44%. That's not that much below, for example, what happened in Runcorn and in Gorton and Denton. The fall in turnout from the general election is only around of the order of 14%. That turnout, in a sense, does say that actually, by the standards of most by-elections, this is, if anything, slightly more than you would expect. And that extent, at least, it's not entirely clear that voters have taken to heart the opponent's message that this is a bit of a farce.
That's what they say. Mr Farage is celebrating, isn't he? He says he's done better than last time, but of course we'll only truly know the numbers, as you say. I've written it down, 24,000 700,
that's for him to get over 70%. Remember that what he actually got last time around, which is the benchmark that Reform
I've got it here.
themselves,
21,225.
Yeah.
Yes, you see, in unison we say that.
But that will be about 63% of the vote.
Okay. John Curtis, we'll be back with you in a moment, but let's go back to Harry Farley, who is at the Leisure Centre in Clacton as we get ever closer to a declaration. So, Harry, how close are we now?
Well, we have just been told in the last minute or so that they are expecting to declare at 6 o'clock, around about 6 o'clock. So what's that? Just over 35 minutes time or so. It has been, I think, fair to say, a long night because of the nature of the counting that John's been talking about, the record number of candidates, what that means in terms of the logistics of how to count, how they've split them into 3 piles, one for Nigel Farage, one for Count Binface and one for everyone else. So there has been logistical hurdles, and it was also a slightly higher turnout than at least some were expecting, as you were just reflecting with Sir John there. And really the result, as we've been saying really since 10 o'clock last night, is not in doubt. But what will be crucial in the hours and days ahead is who wins that argument of what this result means. Nigel Farage and Reform UK will argue that it is a vindication of their decision to call the election, and it will put pressure on those on that standards investigation to at least not potentially, even if they do find Nigel Farage that he's broken the rules, if they found that he has committed a wrongdoing in the parliamentary sense at least, to not issue that strictest of punishments that might lead to another by-election in a few months' time. On the other hand, those other parties will argue that this says nothing. This is a particularly unique corner of England on the Essex coast, and it doesn't reflect wider sentiment. So that debate will rage in the days ahead, and I think that really will be the crucial thing to determine who wins that argument of what we can take from this result that we're expecting in about half an hour.
Harry, let's talk about the conversation that's happening at the moment, though, about whether or not Mr Farage was told to stay away from the counting centre where you are. We're getting conflicting reports, aren't we? Just take us through those.
Yeah, there's a degree of confusion about Nigel Farage's explanation and rationale for staying away. He said in a speech to his supporters there's been a party down the road for his supporters, and he told them that he had been told by Essex Police that there was an organised campaign to disrupt and denigrate the result, was his words, and he went on to say he didn't want to be humiliated alongside what he called a bunch of nobodies, essentially the other candidates here. So that was his reasoning in this speech. He didn't want to be humiliated. It sounded like there was some sort of campaign to sort of maybe heckle, maybe interrupt any speech that he was going to give here. So he didn't want to be humiliated. But then, in the minutes after Nigel Farage gave that speech, a Reform UK spokesperson, officially on the record, sent round a message saying that Essex Police had advised Nigel to stay away because there was a credible threat against him. And so that sounded more serious. That sounded like there was a security threat, or an issue at least. We spoke to Ian Davidson, the official in charge, and he said that he was confident that it was safe for all candidates. And in the last few minutes, we understand that Essex Police have not actually advised anyone to stay away from this count. So conflicting messages, a degree of confusion. The bottom line is Nigel Farage is not here, and we think that might be the first time that we can recall anyway, that a winning election candidate has not turned up to hear their own victory result.
Okay, Harry Farley at the counting centre, thank you very much for the moment. Sir John Curtis, still by my side here in the studio as we approach that declaration. We were talking earlier about the turnout. Just tell us what the turnout is and what that tells us.
Turnout is 44.2%. That's the total number of people who've cast a valid vote divided by the total electorate of just under 880,000 people. I mean, if we first of all compare it with Halton Price and Houghton, which we've been saying all night is the nearest comparable exercise, on that occasion the turnout was 34%. So it's clearly higher than that. And indeed, the turnout is, yes, it's clearly less than in Makerfield, but it's not far short of what happened in both Runcorn and in Gorton Denton. And it's actually higher than in the two Scottish by-elections that also took place on the same day as the Makerfield by-election. So by the standards of this Parliament, the turnout in Clacton is perfectly respectable, and you can see why Reform will think that this adds fuel to their side of the argument, that this was not a stunt, that it wasn't a farce, at least in the eyes of the electorate, that in fact voters were persuaded that this was a sufficiently credible exercise, that people wanted to express their view. Now, of course, what's true is they couldn't vote for Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat, but certainly the one admittedly relatively small poll that was conducted during the campaign suggested that at least those Labour and Liberal Democrat and Conservative voters who were minded to vote, quite a few of them were, and didn't want to vote for Mr Farage, were minded to vote for Count Binface, which is perhaps one of the reasons why in the end Count Binface may do relatively well. And his previous best performance is 1%, so he's certainly hopeful of doing better than that.
I mean, there will be some people turning on the TV this morning, John, because they want to know how well Count Binface is going to do.
Yep.
It was widely thought that Nigel Farage would retain the seat. But actually, there is another story. It's not the main story, but
Yep.
there is another story, isn't there, about how well Count Binface is projected to do. And he's gone from being an eccentric candidate to most likely being second place and getting a decent share.
Yeah, and his success lies in the fact that he stole a march on all the other possible candidates, when in the immediate wake of the decisions of Conservative, Labour, etc., not to fight, Count Binface said, I will stand against Nigel Farage. And lo and behold, he was on the Today programme and Newsnight and other august broadcasting opportunities. Never before has Count Binface, at least as Count Binface, as opposed to being Jonathan Harvey, who is professionally a comedy sketch writer, had so much public exposure. And that then got picked up, not just by the media, but also by Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrats to say, look, the only person who's really trying to stand against him is a dustbin, and therefore using that to suggest that this wasn't a credible exercise. So certainly Jonathan Harvey, if he has done as well as we anticipated, is to be congratulated on his ability. There are, of course, a number of other candidates standing who are sometimes regarded as the eccentric or the jokey, and including not least, and I think this is another new record, 3 different candidates for the same party. The party in question, the monster, raving, loony party, which since 1983 has been adding joy and gaiety to a lot of our elections, particularly Screaming Lord Sutch, who founded the party, did it for many years. More recently, it's been a guy called David Hope, and he's one of the candidates this time. Will be interesting to see whether or not, but did they between them manage to get 5% of the vote? But are they going to all lose their deposits because individually they've got less than 5%? I mean, the rationale for that, I think will probably defeat most people.
Indeed. You mentioned the parties that didn't stand. The Conservative Party describing this as a fake election. Mm-hmm. Labour saying Nigel Farage spent 38 days fighting a bin. I mean,
well, you make my point for me. That indeed they're using Count Binface's presence, the relatively high profile has got, to, as it were, suggest that this was not a serious contest.
What does this, if anything, tell us about the national picture?
It doesn't. To be perfectly frank, this by-election is going to tell us very little about the national picture. I think we should also say this before we go on a bit further down. Even if Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrats had stood, the expectation would be that Nigel Farage would win. He got 46% of the vote back in 2024. And given that support for reform is still running 9-10 points higher across the UK as a whole than they were then, we would expect Farage to get over 50% of the vote, which perhaps is one of the reasons why Mr Farage was confident in calling the by-election and why his opponents weren't too keen on the idea. Now, as to the national picture itself, Whatever happens now in the wake of the Clacton by-election, two things we know is true. One is that in the immediate wake of Mr Farage's announcement that he was going to precipitate the election, which of course followed various allegations about both the funding of reform as well as about his own personal funding, support for reform clearly fell in the polls. They were running at about 26 to 27%. Immediately thereafter, they went down to 24%. So either the publicity that these allegations were getting were beginning to hit home, or some people were indeed disapproving of what Mr Farage was doing and decided that they no longer were reform supporters. So that's one thing we do know. The Clacton by-election, the decision to hold it and the events surrounding that have cost reform support. The second thing we know is that the political world now is different, not just because of that, than the political world as of the time that Nigel Farage...
New Prime Minister, no
Because
less.
we've got a new Prime Minister, indeed, and that in the wake of that, the Labour Party has seen its support rise. It was 19% when Keir Starmer announced his resignation on the steps of Downing Street. It's now running at 25, 26%. And indeed, Labour are narrowly ahead of Reform in the polls. So that lead that Reform have enjoyed for more than a year is no longer with them. They can also see that the Conservative Party have been slowly rising. They're now only 4 points behind Reform. And of course, they're also facing competition from Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain, about 4% in the opinion polls. All that together means that rather than, as it were, clearly commanding the electoral scene, Reform now find themselves, post this by-election, in a much more politically competitive environment. And it's whether or not they can regain their lead, whether they can fend off the potential challenge from the Conservatives, let alone Labour, deal with Restore Britain. These are all now the challenges that Nigel Farage faces. So even if he does manage to persuade people that indeed this election victory does indicate that the voters of Clacton, at least, are still happy with him, he's still facing a much more difficult situation so far as the voters of the whole of Britain are concerned.
OK, so John, thank you very much for the moment. Well, let's replay Nigel Farage's address to that rally of Reform UK supporters in Essex. It happened at around 3 o'clock this morning. Mr Farage claiming victory against what he's described as the establishment.
On the hottest day of the year, in the middle of August, in holiday season, we have secured far more votes than we got in the general election of 2024. And in doing so, we have beaten the candidate for the Unity Party. Yes, there were Liberal Democrats, Labour and Conservative canvassers out canvassing for Count Binface. What an upside-down world it is, where Count Binface is now the candidate of the establishment. I mean, you literally couldn't make it up.
That's Nigel Farage there speaking earlier. And as we have been mentioning, he said he is not going to be attending the count. He said that there was information that he'd received from Essex Police saying, Reform UK saying that there'd been a credible threat against him, and that's why he wasn't going to be attending the count. We'll play you a bit about what Mr Farage said, but subsequently the BBC understands that Essex Police has not advised any candidate that they should not attend the by-election.
I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time. And once again it shows you the sheer intolerance, the sheer loss of fundamental democratic principles that those that went before us fought in world wars to fight for and preserve. And this shows you why the battle that we're engaged upon in this great party, in this great movement of ours, is to get this country back to the values that it needs to be. And so I regret to say, and by the way, I'm not scared of these people, far from it. But I'm damned if I'm going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory, a ringing endorsement of all that I've tried to fight for and you try to fight for, and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. And I will not, sadly, be attending the count, which means I'm going to be here all night.
Nigel Farage there at a gathering of Reform UK supporters in Essex, dubbed Farage Fest. He's not going to be attending the count. Well, let's hear from journalist Tim Burrows, who wrote a book called The Invention of Essex. He's been sharing his assessment of that speech.
I have to say, it's one of the most arrogant pieces of political theatre I've seen in my life. It's very Trumpian, actually. And I can't help but think that a lot of the people in the constituency of Clacton that I've been speaking to in the last few weeks, this is the exact type of thing that they complained about with him. He seems to want to speak to, his content creative team, his social media, but he doesn't seem to want to go to some of the more awkward places in the constituency, Clacton, I mean, it does vote to the right. It has done for years. We're going through, and nationwide, we're going through an anti-establishment moment. There doesn't seem to be, Andy Burnham might change this, perhaps not in Clacton, but there don't seem to be the politicians kind of talking directly to people, particularly working class people. And that's where, you can't, as much as I criticise Farage for that sort of pomposity of that speech, he has identified where his voter base is, and it's in Clacton. If you add the fact that the main parties aren't running against him, I mean, this election's been like shooting fish in a barrel. There's nothing that impressive about it. It's a bit like a seaside kind of silly season escapade, more than an election. I think it's more about the next election, whenever it may be, and Farage is kind of standing in that among voters. Even in Clacton, there was a more in common polling recently that I heard on a podcast, that was talking to Reform voters in Clacton, and there were quite a few who were concerned about the financial scandals and whether they could trust him. And I just wonder if you're kind of acting so arrogantly, not to turn up to the count itself, whether that's a great look in a constituency where, the constituents are already saying Nigel Farage isn't turning up to surgeries, whereas every other MP in the country seems to be able to do that. But one thing that I'd kind of want to move on to about Clacton is, it's quite a deprived place and it needs a lot. If you see the area around the pier, there are hotels there that, have seen better days. Are talking to the people trying to survive through the cost of living crisis, trying to keep their businesses afloat. And, if you ask them, does it seem like you're getting much help from people like Nigel Farage? And they say no. So I guess there's just a general, feeling in Clacton that, okay, we'll give you a chance. It's like a roll of the dice, really. So here's a chance and show us what you can do. And so that's the test for him, I think. Migration is a big issue to people, although actually levels of migration in the constituency are quite low. But I think that's kind of a national conversation. But, people are just struggling, especially I've mentioned it before, the constituency of Jaywick. Jaywick's often has documentaries made about it. I mentioned it recently in the Guardian article that, it has probably double the amount of people with disabilities there, purely because it's actually a very cheap place to live. You can buy a house very cheaply, you can rent very cheaply. And that means the needs of Jaywick are kind of perhaps a little bit different to other more sort of middle-class constituencies. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Frinton, which, is fairly well off. So the needs there are probably different. And I think Farage's base is, a mixture, really. Frinton, I think he likes to kind of visit the rugby clubs and the cricket clubs there. And I met a lot of people in Frinton who actually did have stuff to say about Farage's sort of financial scandals and the by-election, but they couldn't really see an alternative. So he's, in terms of the needs of Clacton, it's a real mixed bag, and I think there's quite a lot of confusion at the moment as to, what Farage could even do as an MP, and it comes down to simple things like potholes, as well.
That's Tim Burrows there. Well, the main Westminster parties have all boycotted the by-election and decided not to stand candidates. Commenting after polls closed, the chair of the Labour Party, Bridget Phillipson, said Nigel Farage spent 38 days fighting a bin in his most desperate attempt yet to deflect attention from the sleaze and scandals engulfing him and his party. Farage may succeed in his runoff against a bin, but he can't, she continues, run from the truth forever. The list of unanswered questions about the £5 million gift he hid from the public, his support from a convicted fraudster and the mountain of other scandals he and Reform are facing isn't going away, the statement continues. In fact, it's getting longer by the day. Meanwhile, a spokesman for the Conservatives said Nigel Farage called this fake by-election in a desperate attempt to draw a line under the questions surrounding his fishy £5 million donation. Whatever the outcome on Friday, this stunt has not done that. Well, Mr Farage has argued he did not need to declare the gift because he received it before he was elected as the MP for Clacton in the summer of 2024. Well, let's go back to the count floor and have a look at the state of play there in Clacton, because it does look much quieter now. It certainly looks that the counting is completed, and now it looks like it's just a case of when we are going to see the results declared. And in the corner there, I'm joined by Sir John Curtis, our elections expert. It looks like the candidates are gathering. Do you know how I can tell? Because I can see Lord
Such.
Lord Such and Count Binface as well. So I'm able to spot them from the distance. Not Lord Such, though, but the Munster Raving Loony attire, shall we say. So what's happening now then, John?
Well, I guess that the returning officer is advising the candidates of the result, which, given there are 34 of them, albeit one of them is not there, will take a little while. And if I'm correct in that, then assuming that nobody successfully calls for a recount or anything like that, maybe because they're close to saving their deposit, then we should proceed to a declaration, but that could still take at least another 10 minutes or so.
Okay, I'm just being told actually that there was an announcement in the hall just before we came to you, John, that the returning officer, as customarily they do, gathered all the candidates and their agents to that little huddle in the corner. I should say little huddle, it's actually a huge huddle for a by-election, a record huddle, shall we say, a record huddle because of the number of candidates, but also a significant huddle because there's one missing.
Indeed, yes, Mr Farage. In a sense, the story of the night has not been the count that's been going on and we can see before us. It's been Mr Farage's announcement that he wasn't going to turn up to the count, and there is now seemingly a day of controversy and disagreement about whether Mr Farage was or was not advised not to attend the count. But
indeed, on one hand,
he is not there, and that's made the story, at least for the last 2 or 3 hours.
Indeed, let's recap our viewers on that, because on one hand, as we played a short while ago, we heard from Mr Farage saying that Essex Police had told him that there was a, what's the quote? He'd been advised by Essex Police that there'd been an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result. Then we heard from Reform UK saying that there was a credible threat to Mr Farage. That, their reasoning, was why they said he wasn't going to be part of that gaggle, as the result appears to be imminent. But since then, we heard from the returning officer himself, who said that there doesn't appear to be any safety or security threat to that hall there. And since then, the BBC understands that Essex Police has not advised any candidate that they should not attend the Clacton by-election count. In a statement shared with us, they say, we have a proportionate and robust policing operation to ensure the safety and security of all participants in the count. So, John, a real kind of curious by-election in so many levels. It all started, of course, when Nigel Farage, just a month ago or so, at the beginning of the month of July, said that he was going to stand down as an MP, triggering that by-election. He said he wanted to sort of clear up any questions people had over this donation that he received and whether there was any improper recording of it. He has denied that he didn't do things by the rules, but he's now being investigated, of course, by Parliament.
Yes, I think one has to say one of the things that did happen much earlier in the night is that Mr Farage did seem to soften his position somewhat on the question of whether or not he should have declared the donation. So I should say there are two issues here that tend to get rather confused. So there are some people who feel that Mr Farage, having received 5 million quid from a crypto financier, is in and of itself an undesirable thing to have happened. There is, however, but the technical issue that the Parliamentary Commission has to deal with is not how much Mr Farage got or even necessarily where it came from, as opposed to should he have, when he became an MP, declared on his declaration of interest that he had received this 5 million quid, because the rules of the House of Commons say that it's not just the money you receive from the day you become elected as an MP that you have to declare, it's also 12 months beforehand, unless that declaration, either it's less than £300, the money is less than £300, or crucially, it's purely personal. And I think the argument is going to be, Mr Farage's argument is, this was purely personal because it was given to me to be able to deal with my security, which I constantly need to have. Oh, and by the way, I wasn't leader of Reform at that time. I wasn't proposing to go back into politics. Whereas others will say, well, given the character of the source, and given that, you know, what we should do about cryptocurrency is a potential issue of public policy, therefore it's not purely personal. And that's what the Parliamentary Commissioner, I think, is going to have to adjudicate about.
There is a possibility, isn't there? We've talked about this earlier in the night, but just to ask you again, for viewers who might have just joined us having woken up, there is a possibility there could be another by-election in Clacton.
Yeah, if indeed the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards says, no, Mr Farage is wrong, and I think this is a serious breach of the rules of the House of Commons, and he recommends that Mr Farage is suspended from the House of Commons for 10 days or more, and then MPs vote in favour of that recommendation, that automatically triggers what's called a recall petition, in which the returning officer, whom we've seen a certain amount of this evening, will have to open up a process that enables the voters of Clacton to say whether or not they wish to recall Mr Farage as their MP and thereby require a by-election. And if 10% of the registered electorate of Clacton sign for that petition, then indeed the by-election will happen. And that's the rules, that's the process. But of course, the bit we don't know is what judgment the Parliamentary Commissioner is going to come to, both in terms of whether the rules were broken, and if he does, what punishment he is going to recommend. And until we know that, we don't know. But yes, I mean, otherwise, assuming if there is a recall petition that 10% of the voters of Clacton will sign the petition, and we wouldn't be surprised about that. Only one recall petition has ever failed, that indeed Mr Farage would be required to face the electorate gain, despite having done so for the last 38 days.
I'm looking at the clock. It's 5:51 here in the UK. It looks like we might not be in the seat for the declaration. We might be handing over to our colleagues at BBC Breakfast at 6. But what are we looking out for? You talked about this earlier, but for viewers again who are just joining this, what numbers should we be looking out for?
So let's give you some numbers to do it. So first of all, let's talk about Reform. So Reform are reminding us that they got, 21,225 votes in 2024. And they are saying that if Mr Farage does better than that, he will have clearly demonstrated that he is even more popular as their MP than he was then, and that the voters are given a clear verdict that they are happy for him to remain as their MP despite the various allegations that indeed we've just been talking about. Another benchmark we could set somewhat higher is that he manages to reach the just over 70% that David Davis got back in 2008, when he similarly precipitated a by-election and stood again. He, on that occasion, got 72%, while 70% of the vote in Clacton would be just over 74,700 votes. So if he gets to 25,000, he will have passed that mark. Next thing is Camp Binface. How well has he done? Well, one poll, very small, and the pollsters say lots of caveats, maybe 20%, which will be far and away his best performance. Superb if he does that. Well, that would need to require to get just over 7,000 votes. And the third figure to have your head when you hear the result is what do you need to get 5%, i.e. to save your deposit? And that, by my calculation, is 1,765 votes. Okay. So there are some measures. So, it will be a rather long declaration, and you might be wondering what the devil to make of it. Well, if you've written down those numbers, then you should be pretty rapidly be able to get an idea of exactly what's happened in terms of the headlines of this result.
There you go. Put your coffee down and get a pen and paper and join in with John, even if we're not still on air for the result. Now, we've just got some breaking news that has come into us via my colleague Harry Farley, who's been with us through much of the night. And he's saying that Reform UK has cancelled a planned speech from Nigel Farage, which was due to take place in Clacton this morning. We haven't got a reason from the party as to why that cancellation has happened. Mr Farage was due to give what the party had billed as a major speech at 10:30 this morning. Now, we did hear from Mr Farage about 3 hours ago or so. You can see the images there from that speech, already declaring victory before, of course, we've had that declaration. And through the course of that speech, that was when he said that he'd been advised by Essex Police that there'd been an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result, and that's why he wouldn't be attending the declaration. We then heard from Reform UK as well, who were saying that there'd been a credible threat against Nigel Farage. But then we heard from the returning officer saying that the venue, as you can see there on the screen, was secure and safe. And the BBC also understanding from Essex Police that no candidate was advised that they should not attend the by-election count. So quite curious developments there, conflicting statements that we're getting. And now the news from Reform UK that planned speech from Nigel Farage, due to take place at 10:30 this morning in Clacton, isn't happening. Interesting development there, John, because of course you would imagine somebody who said a few hours ago that he hasn't just won, but also increased his majority, would want to shout about that.
Yes, I guess those who are professional journalists might be asking themselves whether that is because of the disagreement about whether or not he was advised not to attend the count. Now, that is purely speculation on my part. I have no evidence necessary to say that is true, but one suspects that certainly his political opponents and maybe some journalists might want to suggest that that is perhaps the case. This does look as though this might be a story that keeps on going for a little while as to exactly why Mr Farage has not just turned up to the count, but now has apparently cancelled what was billed as his victory speech and press conference that presumably was designed to ensure that Reform took advantage politically of the success that we're anticipating is going to be declared in what does now literally look, if I can understand these pictures correctly, not much more than a matter of minutes.
No, indeed. I mean, we were hearing before the time of 6 o'clock. So we could be, there's Harry in the background there, lining up to get a good spot. What's interesting about this is because there's so many candidates, 34 or 33, shall we say now, with the absence of Mr Farage, is normally, of course, there's a stage built for everyone. But as you can see there, they're all standing on the floor of this gymnasium because they wouldn't all fit on, would they, John?
Correct. And if I remember correctly, the same thing happened also in Halton Price and Howden when they had 26 candidates. Again, they just had a floor space. They didn't have a stage. I guess there must be a concern that any stage would suffer the risk of perhaps having somebody fall off it, and that might be regarded as an undesirable risk at the end of what clearly has been a long all-night count.
A record by-election in many ways,
yes.
With more plot twists than most, shall we say, John. But you see one of the plot twists right there, because you see all those candidates there, none from a major political party.
Indeed, yes. It's a night that's going to be absent of, we've had this important by-election, lots of interest, even lots of international interest, and none of the major players present. I guess one of the things we might also ask ourselves is whether any of the candidates will say anything after the returning officer. I mean, normally the winning candidate, politely says...
I'm sure they'd all love to, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
all
now, whether or not Count Bintface will seize the opportunity, and because, the convention is that the winner thanks the returning officer and the police and the counters for all their hard work overnight, before then perhaps, making some kind of political declaration. Now, whether or not, assuming he is second, and sometimes somebody who comes second says that, well, the returning officer I can see is standing before a microphone.
We just listen in. Let's listen in, see if there's anything to hear. No, he must be looking at the clock, John.
Who knows?
Thinking, I said 6 o'clock, I'm going to wait for 6 o'clock. But, well, there he is.
The glasses have come off, and I see he's clearly not going to read anything at the moment. Oh, he's gone away again.
How many times have you sat here in anticipation for these by-elections, John? And what's interesting, there's been quite a few by-elections since Labour took to office again.
Well, there's only been half a dozen, and the truth is by-elections are not as common these days as they once were. It's partly to do with the fact that the average age of the House of Commons is somewhat lower than it once used to be. It's also because by-elections are often lost. And so parties are reluctant to vacancies to be created for other than reasons that they regard as desirable or valid. So to that extent, at least, therefore, they're no longer lightly or wantonly engaged in the way that was once the case.
OK, well, there they are all lined up, John. And the returning officer will be speaking imminently. He's back. And we are expecting that declaration in any minute now.
Good morning and welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Sarah Campbell.
Our headlines today. Firefighters in the West Midlands say they've been tackling one of the most significant incidents in their history, as several fires rage across the region, destroying homes and forcing dozens of residents to evacuate.
The results of the Clacton by-election is about to be declared, but Nigel Farage has already claimed victory.
On the hottest day of the year, in the middle of August, in holiday season, we have secured far more votes than we got in the general election of 2024.
Rail accident investigators are trying to work out why a passenger service partially derailed in East Sussex yesterday afternoon.
Good morning in sport. Amazing Amy does the double. Amy Hunt wins her second gold medal in Birmingham, taking the 200 metres title at the European Championships. Warns she's not finished yet.
And good morning. Yesterday, of course, the hottest day of the year so far, the extreme heat with 38.1 degrees Celsius. Today, it's still going to be hot and sunny in the southeast of England, but cooler and fresher further north and west. I'll bring you all the details very shortly.